I'm gonna call the meeting to order at 6:02. We have our minute taker available. And Mike, if you just want to help make sure we're somewhere in the lines. The first thing we have is to approve our agenda. But we have, is there feedback on that?
Here's feedback. I can figure out why.
Check they can hear us.
Liz, can you hear us?
Hey Liz, can you hear us? You did.
I can. This is Kim.
Oh, Kim can, all right.
There's something wrong with Liz's audio.
Try it again, Aaron.
Liz, can you hear us?
I'll text her.
Okay, well, okay.
Anybody else from the board who's remote?
No, it's just Liz right now.
Brad potentially raised his hand.
All right, we'll press on and
She can't hear us.
she cannot.
No.
Others can.
Kim said she could. Can anyone else on the Zoom platform hear us?
Yes,
I can hear you.
Yeah,
Right.
It's gotta be on
It's
Liz's
just
end.
on Liz's end. Okay. All right, so we'll press on. So, the first thing on our agenda is to approve the agenda. However, we have a few. Oh, yeah. good. Was gonna do our, okay, yeah, sure.
That's first on the agenda.
You're right. I skipped it on my list. All right, the first thing we're gonna do then, back in the is public comment. So for people who are in the room, do we have any public comment? John?
do I need to come up there or can I sit?
I think it's easier if people hear you on Zoom.
Hi, everyone. I am glad that there's a few people here. I figured that there'd actually be more people. Just because I know the last time we were here, there was a lot more people that obviously are concerned, clearly with the budget failing a second time. People are concerned. It was a close vote, but there's a problem and we really need to address it. And I still don't know whether or not it's people voting for the amount or whether it's the allocations, but I know in my mind, I think we can do better. I think that we can make it work and have it not have us lose our supports and our teachers. I was looking back at the board minutes from 2022 and 2021. In both years, there's teachers that are begging for support. We can't afford to lose any supports for the students. It's already unbearable for some classrooms. Kids are not functioning well, and it's not necessarily anything we did or didn't do. COVID has impacted kids in a substantial way, but we can't afford to lose supports, and teachers are not going to be able to do their jobs. They need to be able to have students at their best already, and they can't do that without help. Kids that receive special education services are being denied services. They've been denied for a very long time. I'm not sure if anybody's aware, but we are one of the lowest special ed spending out of all the supervisory unions. We're flagged as like 20% lower than what would be estimated. But yet we're on the higher end, probably like within, I think it was the top 12 of highest budget. So how we're the lowest special ed spending, but one of the highest budgets of all supervisory unions, doesn't really make any sense to me. It's difficult to be on the ground level, and I know you guys are supposed to have a 10,000-foot view, you know, but on the ground level, all I hear is pain and people begging for help and being denied over and over and over. I've seen it personally. I've heard about it from countless parents. People afraid of being able to speak because they're afraid of retaliation. And that's something that is a very real fear. I just got my records request about construction. And the part that is truly very disturbing to me is the fact that in 2021, when we were busy listening to teachers begging for help in the fall around October, is when proposals were starting to be drawn up. You know, we were worrying about facilities when teachers were begging for help and kids were destroying classrooms because they needed help. And we were busy worrying about renovating, and not just renovating, but doing improvements that weren't necessary. I know the security upgrades were necessary. The facility needed repairs. But when we needed support, I think the support was more important. But as was said in the article from Madison Independent, from that same time frame, was that we've been focusing too much on supports, and that's why the buildings were being neglected. So we had to reshift our priorities. But I don't think there's going to be people here to be in these beautiful buildings. But the fact is, we were told that we needed to put money into the capital reserve fund for things like the roof. That's gonna fail anytime now. The electrical, and yet these things still aren't done. On the capital improvement spreadsheet, it's still not being done right now. Why are we still doing more renovations and more improvements, not repairs, improvements? Why are we doing more improvements when we still need to do the roof? When we were told we're gonna put money in the capital reserve fund for the roof. And it's still not done. And we were not told that we were going to be having a lobby project go so significantly over budget. We were not. So to me, that's lying by omission. And I feel like that is a complete disservice to us as voters. And the fact that board members actually were not aware of the bids. My understanding is that some of this was done with public dollars, budgeted,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say,
but also
if you
With
could just wrap
federal-
up so we could.
Yeah.
get to this.
Also with federal grant money, which means bids have to be placed properly, and I don't believe that happened. Federal grants must abide by federal guidelines, and I don't think that that was done, because I have not seen a single public bid at all, and that's not right. The whole project was not done right, and we need to hold people accountable, because this is not right at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
Is this like our time to talk?
Yes.
Okay.
Sure, yeah.
If
you just state your name.
yeah, Eugenie Doyle from Moncton. So I came, I'm a farmer in Moncton, parent of 3 kids who went through the Moncton and Mount Abe school system, and we're very happy with the programs. We're basically primed to be pretty happy with the schools. And I came partly to see my school board members. Kylie and Justin, I've never met you. Barb, I haven't seen you for many years. I have a suggestion, I guess, which is to, because there are a lot more people that are concerned about the budget than are here. I'm sure you know that. And I assume that you wanted a lot more people to vote on the budget than did. Would that be correct? Okay, so I have a couple of suggestions. One for Moncton, put the vote date on that big board in the center of town. That is what people look at. The fire department breakfast is there and the Boy Scout spaghetti supper. I bet they will get more people at those events than voted. So I think use what we have. Front porch forum, the little like things that you put out, Mr. Ream, and that our board members send around is not going to do it. That's just not, I think also more personal interaction if possible. If even our three or one of you could meet, you've been invited to the library for a greet your neighbors afternoon in May. I don't think you've all responded, but here I am to ask you to respond. I think the more that in the towns, the individual board members get to know their own constituents, you are the ones, we are the people who voted for you. So in terms of like community engagement, we used to call it local control, but I know things have changed, but it still is local control. We think of it that way. We that vote, and we want to be able to do that. We want to be able to support you who come here every week, every other week, a lot, right? Yeah. So we want to be able to support you. We want you to be able to do your job here by already knowing what are the concerns so that you don't hear about it on the Moncton community page or Front Porch Forum on Facebook. So yeah, something in our towns and using the personal touches to ask our opinions. I mean, I don't usually really get easily intimidated, but this is a pretty intimidating kind of setup where you have just a little bit of time for people to talk and then hurry up and sit down, but I will do that. Thank you.
Anyone else in the room? Is there any public comment on Zoom? Dana?
Hi, I'm Dana DeWitt, and I'm a teacher at Mount Abraham. I just want to point out that it's really clear, it's been an observation that the one district whose budget passed this last time was the one that did cuts in other areas besides just those who have student contact. And I've heard it from other teachers, I've heard it from community members and from former colleagues who also work in that district, that is the observation. And I just want that to be noted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just
Anyone else on Zoom? We're in the room.
I'll say something real
Okay,
quick.
sure.
Do you want me to go up? or can I
It would be
stay?
great if you could, just because people are online.
Yeah, so just, I'm not gonna get into the nitty gritty or who I am.
Can you
or-
say your name, please?
Yeah, my name is Kelly Headley. I'm here from Bristol. I have 3 children. One of them currently goes to school in the district. The other 2 do not. I just want to say as a parent, as well as a parent of a special needs child, that my expectation for the district as well as the board is that we as a community make the best choices as an educational institution to keep education as the top priority. And it feels a little bit at this point like we've lost that. And it's hard to hear some of the things that have been brought up from all of the public record requests. And as Shauna slightly said, and I'll piggyback on it a little bit, it's really painful. And I know that pain on a personal level. It's really painful to have your child denied services that they are legally allotted and then denied them. And then to find out we spent $70,000 on a TV instead, $82,000 on furniture instead, or $36,000 on a display case instead. And that hurts. That's painful. Because a lot of us parents that are not here because they're worried about retaliation, as am I. I had no intent to speak tonight. And they're worried about retaliation for valid reasons, and, they're feeling a lot of pain, as am I right now, that our children and their education isn't being valued at the same rate as maybe other things. And so my expectation is that we, as an educational institution, keep education at the forefront and are able to distinguish the difference between wants, which would be a TV, or needs, which is education. And that is all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. We're going to close this public comment section. We'll have another one in the,
Are you gonna be
Karen?
giving,
yeah, 1 second, please.
are you gonna be giving some comments tonight so people will know where we're at in the process? Otherwise, I'll have to speak, but I don't want to. I want you to speak because I don't want your job. I want you to spend more time so that we can know where we're at. This is not an easy process. We're late in the process. And before you know it, it's 25, so. Will you be saying anything about the budget process tonight?
Yes.
Okay. Will there be room for additions or comments while you're doing that?
Yeah, so I'm gonna jump right to the agenda section and I'll walk through the agenda real quick, okay? Before you,
Aaron, I'm sorry, this is Teresa Guile. I cannot figure out how to put my hand up for some reason. But are you going to just touch on and let us know when there will be meetings about the next budget that will be presented?
yes, we're gonna get to that in our agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I'm gonna jump into our agenda piece. Before we move to approve the agenda, which right now, we're going to, the agenda goes as follows. We'll do an action to approve the agenda as amended. We'll have a consent agenda. We'll do we have a board training set for tonight, which is why we have a guest with us tonight. We'll do some limitations monitoring, and then during our board management and governance section is when we'll talk about the budget, setting a new budget target, talking about dates for votes and next steps for the next fiscal year, not just this current one we're voting on. At the end of that, we'll have another public comment section, and then we have executive sessions that we are going into at the end. So hopefully all your questions will be answered there. We don't have currently a question and answer section after that budget presentation tonight, after we talk, but there will be more opportunities in future agendas for that question and answer piece. So before we approve the agenda, we have to add a few items. One, under the board management and governance section, the current item that is I will move to J, because I will now be adding a warning and a ballot approval for the next revote. The next one is under one of our executive sessions, T1 BSA 5313A3, which is the appointment or employment or evaluation of a public officer or employee. That includes the performance check-in and leave requests. We have a second employee with a leave request, so we will need to add her to action item X for approval of a requested leave. Does that make sense? Okay, can I please get a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Thank you, Kathy. In a second? Second. Melissa? All those in favor of approving the agenda as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes. Next is our consent agenda. Can I please get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Mike? Second. Kathy? All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. We have a guest with us tonight. We have Sure, you can just.
You're very close. Erin, I know my name is not easy to pronounce, so I will save you the embarrassment.
I appreciate it.
Debbie Singizer. I'm Debbie Singizer from the Vermont School Boards Association, and I'm the Director of Board Services at that organization. I've been with BSBA for shy about of a year. I have met Steve before. I remember your face was very familiar when you walked in. I think, because you serve on the career center. Yeah, so I met you before. Nice to see you again. I would love to ask Patrick to just pull up the PowerPoint. And then I'll click through it. I did send around a sheet for you to sign if you don't mind. I'm not gonna do anything with it other than we keep track of how, this is for our own internal records. So as I said, my name is Debbie Singizer. I'm really grateful to be here to talk about this topic that's on the screen, board authority, which you can't really read yet, but it says board authority and accountability in a policy governance system. My own school board service actually started way back in 2009 when I was living in Kathmandu, Nepal at the time, and I served on a school board for an international school there, K through 12. So lots of grades, not as many students. When we moved back to the United States, I ran for school board again, and this time I was serving on the Barstow Unified Union School District Board. It's in Rutland County. It's part of the Rutland Northeast Supervisory Union. We're in a side-by-side with Otter Valley. And we are going through our own budget revote right now. Polls close in 35 minutes. So say a little extra wish if you don't mind. For us, I served on the Barstow Unified School District Board for about 6 years. I was chair for 4 of those years. I rotated off in 2021. Thanks, Erin. And decided to run again. So I just ran and was reelected in this year at town meeting day. And my main objective in running again was to really help the board get back on track in terms of its policy governance practices. We are a policy governance board. In fact, when I first served, we made the decision to transition from a traditional governance board to a policy governance board. And it took us about 2 years to do that. By the time we figured out what policy governance is, we had some training. We actually had the fortune of being trained by Miriam Carver herself, who's married to John Carver. You may know those names. They're the ones that created policy governance. We worked with Val Gardner, who was at the Vermont School Boards Association, a group out of Canada called Brown Dog Consultants, which is, I'll give you information about them later.
We've had training.
You've had training with them, so you know Susan Williamson. Perfect. And we also were mentored by other boards. That was a great way to learn about policy governance, was really learn from those who are already doing it. And at that time, it was Winooski and Orange Southwest who were kind of leading the policy governance pack. And so we used to go to some of their meetings and invite them to come and observe our meetings. And why do I tell you all this? Because I just want to let you know that there's lots of ways you can learn about policy governance and practice policy governance. So as I said, we still use the policy governance today. We officially became a policy governance board in March of 2018, and that's when we fully adopted our policy packet. You guys did you become policy governance in June of 2018? Because that's the date on most of your policies. So
That's when we unified.
That's when.
So all the policies were updated. We were policy governance prior to that.
You were.
And as a supervisory union.
Okay, great. So your policy governance practices may even predate ours. I mean, before 2018.
Yeah, I arrived in 2016 and we were already policy governance then. Tricky to be policy governance in the supervisory union structure.
Yes.
But
especially if you don't have all the
time.
districts using it, right?
Right.
Yeah, our superintendent used to say she lived with 2 feet in 2 different worlds because some boards were well, we only have two district boards, but some were following policy governance and the other one wasn't. And so it was really hard to kind of pivot from one to the other. So this evening, your chair, or in policy governance language, we call you the chief governing officer, and the vice chair, and the superintendent, who we call the CEO in policy governance. I'm sure you know those terms. They asked me to come talk about this topic, board authority and accountability in a policy governance system, and specifically how committees work in this system. So where they get their authority, committees get their authority from, and to whom are they accountable? So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. It's a huge topic, and we just have an hour. So really, I think what we agreed, the four of us, was that our aim tonight is to consider this as an appetizer, maybe, to a multi-course meal. And this is just to whet your appetite for a little bit more professional development and learning. And that's very appropriate in a policy governance board, because actually one of your policies mandates that you have continual learning. And that's actually found under 4.7 under governance investment. If there's some things that come up tonight that we can't get to, and I expect there will be, I have 3 suggestions for how we handle those. One is we kind of consider it as a topic for possible future training, and that could even happen at your board retreat this summer if you thought that was appropriate. We can parking lot it. And I might just ask if is anybody recording or taking minutes?
Yes.
Then if the recording secretary could just make note of some unanswered questions. If it's something we can circle back to at the end of the hour and address, that'd be great. I don't think there'll be time, but it's the type of thing I'm happy to follow up with in an email to the person or to the people. I'll send my response to the whole board. So if you are relatively new or even brand new to policy governance, which I believe a number of you are, how many of you were just elected this past town meeting day? Okay. This will be pretty fast paced, and it may leave you with more questions than answers, because it does presume a basic level of understanding and knowledge about policy governance. But here's my ask: don't panic. And be patient. Really just listen and take it in, and follow along to the best of your abilities. And I will leave Erin and Patrick with information about how you can get that foundational knowledge, which is really essential to being an effective board member in a policy governance system. Okay, there's lots of ways we can do it. I have a book. This is a book that I am so in love with. This is an old edition. I don't have my edition with me. It's at my house. I've grabbed this from the office, but Carolyn Oliver writes this amazing policy governance book, Getting Started with Policy Governance. I feel like every board member, as soon as they're elected to a policy governance board, should get one, because she writes in such an easy to understand way. The Carvers are very academic, and their book is really good, but it's also extremely dense and hard for me to stay awake reading. This one is beautiful because she uses a lot of euphemisms and analogies, and it's just a very accessible type of reading. So that's one of my tips for new board members, and maybe it's something you have in your budget. So I also ask that you give yourselves and your board leaders a little bit of grace. If you haven't had the training as a new board member yet in policy governance, this has been, as we just heard, an extremely challenging time for your district with the budget defeats, actually. And I'm sure that your training didn't get the training and onboarding of new board members didn't get the attention that it normally gets and that it really deserves. I know as board chair of my board, so not only was I reelected, I was elected chair. And I'm a board chair who knows how important this onboarding of new board members is. We're even not able to do it to the best of what we would like to do, just given what's happened with our budget. But we do the best we can, and we keep the faith that the policy governance training will happen. Okay. All right. quickly, if I could, because you heard a lot about me, I'd love to know a little bit more about the board members in the room. Just what your name, length of service, so I can get a better sense of your experience here. And what do you do outside of the board when you're not here? For fun or a job, whatever you want to share, just something, anything. Mike?
Sure, I'll start.
Okay,
So I'm Mike Dash. This is the beginning of my second year on the board.
okay.
And I'm a professor at Middlebury College.
Great.
What do you do outside of school board?
He's a
Aside from being a
professor.
professor at Middlebury, that takes up a lot. I have 2 kids. They also take up a fair amount of my time. And every once in a while, I'll play a game of soccer if I get the chance.
I'm Kathy Apgar. I've been on for 14 months. What I do outside of school is I teach at Champlain College, and I also I'm the director of a private preschool in Burlington. And I live in New Haven with my husband and our eldest son, and I love to kayak, canoe, do a little bit of hiking, sewing, weaving, spinning.
Knitting.
It's too boring.
That's my hobby, knitting. Thank you, Kathy.
I'm Kristen Toy, from Starksboro. I've been on the board for, I think, a year and a half. I came in sort of at a funky time, to take the spot of, one of the Lincoln reps. Outside of school, I work full-time for a company in Williston where, I'm the Jane of all trades, as I like to say.
Nice.
And I have 2 kids, a senior here and a sophomore here. Athletes, musical stuff, all the things. So when I'm not doing sport ball, I'm trying to find a little bit of downtime.
Good luck with that.
Yes, thank you.
Ashley Bassett, New Haven. I joined in March. I'd been working with the board in different ways prior to that through the Community Input Committee. I am an educator, program director at a preschool as well. And I do a little hobby farming, have 2 kids. I have a daughter at Mount Abe and a daughter at Beeman. Spend a lot of time outside, playing with animals, gardening.
Nice. Actually, were you elected this time or were you appointed? You were in March of
Yeah,
town meeting day. Is that when you had your
Elected.
elections? Okay.
Hi, I'm Daniela Sutherland. I've lived in Bristol since January of this year and got myself appointed to the board in March. My work is in educational leadership and policy, in particular, local control of Vermont school boards, and I'm really surprised to see how different policy governance is since I've been working with highly effective boards in the south of the state that don't use this. So I'm going to be trying to get on board with a different approach. I have a daughter at BES.
Hi, I'm Kylie. I'm from Moncton. I was elected, newly elected in March. I have 3 kids, 2 in school, 1 here, 1 at Moncton. I'm a family nurse practitioner. I have a micro practice in South Burlington. I work part-time at UVM. And I spend most of my time these days chauffeuring my children around.
Wait till they get their licenses. That's a whole different.
Worries. Total game changer. Different set of worries, yeah.
I'm Melissa Laurie from Bristol. I'm on the same timeline as Danella, so this is like my 3rd meeting or something. So this is all very new to me. Outside of the board, I am the controller for the University of Vermont Health Network, such a mouthful. I live in Bristol with my 2 sons and my husband, and I, like Kylie, am in the car every night, shuttling them to one sport or another.
Justin from Moncton. Let's see, I got appointed a year ago, so like Mike on year 2 here. What do I do outside of school board? I'm a dad of 2. Love cold plunging in Lake Champlain in the wintertime.
Wow.
And I landscape for a company in Charlotte.
Wow.
So love planting trees. Good.
Steve Rooney, been on the board, I think, since 2018.
Okay.
retired architect, 35 years. And I volunteer building houses for Habitat.
Wow.
um, Keep my wife sane. She's a special educator in Essex Junction.
Hmm. Aaron? Okay.
Erin Jipner. I'm headed into my third year on the board. Outside of school, I just finished my PhD in early and infant childhood development. And I'm a behavior specialist. And I also have two children, both at BES. We're both busy.
Mhm. I am Barb, I'm from Moncton, and 14 months is my length of service. I am a retired art educator. I am currently do a lot of childcare for my grandchildren and make jewelry and paint. Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate that. All right, so.
Oh, yeah, we have Liz.
Oh,
online.
Liz, sorry.
Hopefully she can hear us now. Liz, are you there?
Yes, I can hear you now. I'm Liz Sayre. I'm from Bristol. I was appointed as well, but back in 2017. So I have had lots of opportunities and still need clarification and still have more to learn about policy governance. So I appreciate you being here. I'm a parent of two. I have a kindergartner and a 17-year-old. And one thing that we like to do is I'm a respite care provider. And one thing that our family likes to do a lot is we participate in a lot of events because my son uses sign language. So we participate in hands and voices events, and that's kind of something I think that's special about our family. So.
You all are very interesting individually. Each of you really are. I'd enjoy having dinner with each of you and just talking about your lives and backgrounds and careers and experiences. So up here on the screen, as you can see, I'm going to give you a very quick and high level overview of policy governance. So this will be a review for some of you who have been using policy governance, and this will be brand new for those of you that are recently elected and appointed to the board. Again, this training assumes a basis of understanding already, but don't panic. We will make sure that you've got the adequate resources that you need to really build the foundation and get that basic knowledge that you need. So policy governance is a comprehensive set of 10 principles, which you see on the slide, that when they are consistently applied, they provide a whole system approach to governance. It starts with recognizing the fundamental reasons that a board exists and the nature of authority of that board. Policy governance, what it does is it integrates these 10 principles that are designed to allow for accountable board leadership. The board, you all sitting here, are ultimately responsible for everything that happens in the district. However, you certainly don't do everything in the district. I mean, it's impossible. You're not in the schools every single day. You couldn't possibly do everything. So how can you be accountable or responsible for everything in the district, you might ask, or you might wonder. And that is through your ability and your authority to delegate specifically to your superintendent or your CEO. And you're delegating. What are you delegating? You're delegating your management and operations responsibilities to Patrick. And then he delegates down from there. So policy governance provides clarity about what does success look like and who does what, who's responsible for what. very quickly, again, this is a very fast overview. The board maintains its focus on the results and the outcomes of the organization. And when I say organization, I mean the district. And the board really stays future focused. What's happening down the road? Not just this year, next year, but like 5, 10, 15 years down the road. Rather than focusing on the day-to-day management and again, operations of your district. That's very present focused work, right? That's like what's happening today, what's happening tomorrow. And again, that's the responsibility of your CEO, the superintendent. So another way to think of this in terms of focus is that the board focuses on the question of why. Why does Mount Abraham Unified School District exist? Its purpose, why does it exist? Whereas Patrick's thinking much more about the what does the district do and the how does it get its work done. Okay, so that's just a really simple explanation about what policy governance is with these 10 principles. Now, we don't have time to go into depth into each of these 10 principles. So what I decided I would do is pull out the principles that are most relevant to our topic today, and that's accountability and authority, okay? So in your board packet, you have something called the policy governance source document, which hopefully was sent to you, and if you didn't get it, it kind of popped up all my principles at once, which I didn't want it to do, but that's okay.
The big packet, sorry to interrupt, the big packet is all of our policies. What she's holding should be in the agenda.
So it looks like this. It's done by a group called Govern for Impact. And it's a source document. And the reason I wanted you all to have it is because it does give definitions and a brief description of all 10 principles, but we're not going to hit all 10. We're going to do 4 today. And then attached to it is a frequently asked question, an FAQ document, which I think is quite good that accompanies the source document. So again, for those of you who are brand new to policy governance, read this because I think this could help. It might actually cause a little bit more confusion, but I think it can also help. So on this slide, we have the first 5 of the 10 principles: ownership, position of the board, board holism, ends policies, and board means policies. I want to just talk about the first 3: ownership, position of the board, and board holism, and what each of those mean and how they're relevant to our topic this evening. So the board's role is one of servant leader. What do I mean by a servant leader? So the board exists to serve on behalf of its legal or moral owners. It exists to serve on behalf of its legal or moral owners while it leads the organization. So that's where the servant leader term comes from. When we talk, in our case, about educational governance in Vermont, we have to think about, well, who are our owners? Who are the owners of our school district? It's the residents, it's the people that live in your district towns: Bristol, Moncton, New Haven, Starksboro. Did I forget any towns? Okay. So the board exists to act as the informed voice or agent, some people call them the agent of the owners. Okay, and that's what this first principle, ownership, gets to. Now, if we are serving on behalf of our owners, how do we know what our owners want? How do we know what their expectations are? And I'm open to ideas or suggestions. And where could we go to tonight and answer that question? What they wish, what they want.
Listening to the public comment that every meeting, that's at the beginning and the end, is really important and lets us know
Yep.
Yeah.
They're already written down though somewhere,
Ends policy.
the ends policy. Yep. So your ends policy, when they were created, it's called an ends policy. You might have a global end statement. That's what you usually call the top phrase. And then below it, you'll have some sub policies. That policy, and I wasn't here when it was created, but I'm guessing and I'm hoping, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of time was spent with your community, with your owners, to get information to help write that ends policy. So the ends policy and policy governance answers 3 questions. What benefit are we delivering as a school district to whom? Who are the people we're benefiting, helping, and at what cost? So that is all your ends policy. And what I would suggest is it's quite a long one. It's a whole page. At the very least, as a board member, really get familiar with that global end statement, the top one, okay? Does anybody have it in front of them? Could you read it? I saw somebody nod their head down there.
Our school system exists to educate the children of Mount Abraham Unified School District so that they can meet the challenges of lifelong learners and responsible citizens at a cost deemed acceptable by the community.
Right.
Further, the board is committed to equity and outcomes for each student so that students' achievement of the ends is not limited or predetermined by characteristics such as family economics, ethnicity, race, religion, class, geography, disability, language, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, or initial proficiencies.
Perfect. So then below that, you've got 3 categories. Core subjects in a digital and global environment, life and career skills, and then learning and innovation skills with some bullets underneath each of those. But really try to understand and process those first 2 statements and always keep those in the forefront of your minds, because that's the wishes and the expectations of your owners. That's what they want to see. Until you decide to revise your ends policy, which it might be time to do because this was written in 2018, right? And so I think there's no like gold standard in terms of how often you should update your ends policy, but given what's happened in our world in the last 5 years, it might be a good time to rethink about revising or updating your ends policy, which would could be the topic of another training. How do we do that? Okay. So that's all I want to say about the ownership. The second principle is the position of the board. And this one basically means that where are you getting your authority from as a board? You're getting it from your owners. Okay. And who are your owners?
Residents.
Yeah, your community. It's the residents of the district towns. And that authority is given from them to you, to the board. It's passed down to the superintendent, and then it's passed down from there. And I'll show you a diagram in a couple slides that kind of illustrates this better. Board holism is a third principle, which I think is very relevant to authority and accountability, because you know this, the board is held and used as a body, right? You speak with one voice as a board. You don't speak as individuals on the board. You don't give instructions as individuals. You don't give instructions to your CEO. I mean, you know this, if you know about good governance, we know that the board is a whole, it acts as a whole, it speaks as a whole. Individual board members do not have the authority to instruct staff. Okay, so that's what the board holism principle is about.
Debbie, can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
So, I really appreciate this overview, and one of the things that I'm sort of struggling with is, on the one hand, our responsibility as a board is to the why and not the what or the how, while we also maintain a responsibility to our owners. So when the owners have ideas about what and how, what is our role in being that informed agent in terms of satisfying or heeding the desires of the community, while also staying in the how, if their concerns are at the level of the what? Sorry, so the why.
The why.
Sorry, the why.
The why.
Yeah.
How do you stay in the
how do
world
we
of why?
When the owners are very concerned in a given moment about the what or the how.
And that's typical, right? I mean, because they are concerned about today. They're very present focused, right? So what would you think, what do you think the answer to that question is?
Well, you
Any
have to
ideas?
rely on a lot on the information from your administration on how you might execute, how they intend to execute the what. And then weigh that against our larger goals.
Were you asking in the context of what happens if your owners approach the board with ideas about how things should be done differently in the district?
I think that's the idea, in the sense that we've heard lots of voices recently.
Right,
You know, specific to a budget about direct concerns,
right.
right? Which really are about what and how. And I think there's been frustration, if I'm gonna read into it, and maybe rightly so, with the board trying to stay at why,
Mhm,
coming off as maybe not listening or hearing
mhm,
the direct concerns that the ownership presents.
mhm,
And so trying to figure out how do you navigate
mhm. Those two things.
really listening to the owners while at the same time trying to maintain the sort of policy governance focus of why.
Mhm. So hold on to that question, because I think we're gonna be able to answer that when we see this diagram that's coming up. Okay,
Perfect, thank you.
all right. Just one more principle I want to touch on, and that's the third one down. Clarity and coherence of delegation, because that also is a principle that's relevant to board authority and accountability. So what does clarity and coherence of delegation mean in policy governance? Well, the identification of any, I don't know if this is a word, I copied it from the source document. Is this a word, delegatee? A delegatee, okay. The identification of any delegatee must be hyper clear in terms of authority and responsibility. No subparts of the board, such as a committee or any of the officers, can be given jobs or tasks to do that interfere with or duplicate or obscure the work that's given to the CEO. Okay. So how do you delegate responsibility? And this might be getting to some of Mike's question. How do you as a board delegate the management, the day-to-day management and operations to your CEO, the superintendent? How do you do that?
Through the executive limitation.
Yes, you do. Those are your guardrails. Yes, that's true. And there's another bucket of policies.
Liz?
Our monitoring report.
Yeah. But even before you get to monitoring, Liz, how do you delegate to your CEO or superintendent?
Through our ends policy and our strategic plan. Is
Oh.
that also?
It's done through your A3 policies, which are your board management delegation policies. So if you haven't looked at your policies recently, would be a good time to do it, not right this moment. But take a look, because it's all spelled out in your policies, how you're delegating those responsibilities of the how and the what to your superintendent. Yep.
Is there ever a time when the board giveth and the board taketh away, if we will, where you get to a point where we've perhaps given too much to our CEO and we need to rein it in and bring it back and take responsibility, take more responsibility, or assign it differently?
That's always a possibility. And it would be something that would have to be done through your policies. Okay. So we're going to talk about the policies, I think, hang on. Yeah, we're coming up on that one too. So hang on to that one too, Kathy. All right. This is the diagram I wanted to show you all. It seems like it's a kind of a very simple, maybe oversimplified diagram, but I like it for its simplicity. As I said before, one of the strengths of a policy governance system is that it really helps to clarify roles and responsibilities in your organization, in the district. We know sometimes even from firsthand experience that when roles and responsibilities are not clear, this leads to confusion at best and conflict at worst. So that's one, I think, of the strengths of policy governance is it really makes roles and responsibilities acutely clear. So let's review what those roles and responsibilities are very, very briefly. Again, as we said, the board's role is one of servant leader. We noted that under the ownership principle, yes, where the board exists to serve on behalf of its owners while it simultaneously leads the whole organization. It gets its authority, and here we go. It gets its authority from its owners. And who are these owners? Our community members, right, of our district towns. And that authority is passed down to the board, which is then passed from the board to the CEO. And then the CEO passes it down to the staff and then ultimately down to your clients or customers. In this case, it's your students. Accountability just does the opposite. It flows up, right? Back up through from your clients and customers, your staff, your CEO to the board, and then ultimately the board is responsible accountable to the owners of your community, the community members. So what is the point of this shape of the diagram? And that's why I think this is an interesting diagram. Like, why is it designed this way? Because at the top, you probably have owners, which are most plentiful, like they're the most numerous, right? Your community members. And then your board tends to be of a smaller size. And then that point in the middle represents the direct contact that the board has with the CEO. And the board as a whole, again, as a whole, not as individual members, but as a whole, you delegate that authority down to your CEO through that one point. You're not delegating it down to the staff, you're delegating it to Patrick. And then Patrick in turn delegates and gives authority down to the staff, which again, turns out to be a bigger group. And then ultimately goes down to the base, which is your customers and clients. So the CEO is one person and he will delegate down within his organization. So he's delegating down to the principals, directors in the central office, right? And then within those teams, they also delegate down, all right? So that's how that all works. But your one direct contact or your one direct report is your superintendent. And that's really important to keep in mind in a policy governance system. So again, this question of how can a board be responsible for everything if it isn't in the school all the time? And it's through this ability to delegate from down to the CEO and then onwards down from there. The CEO does their own delegation.
So, Debbie?
Yeah.
Under the principles of policy governance that you also forwarded, it says ownership. If you can clarify for it, because I think it's really important in your diagram. The board exists to act as the informed voice and agent of the owners,
right?
Whether they are owners in a legal or moral sense.
Right.
All owners are stakeholders.
Yeah.
But not all stakeholders are owners. Only those whose position in relation to an organization is equivalent to the position of a shareholder in a for-profit corporation.
Correct.
So that's kind of confusing to me
It
because
is.
we're already talking here about ownership by being a community.
Mhm.
And now we're funneling it down to what? It seems completely.
Do you understand the difference, the why owners are different from stakeholders?
No, I don't.
Okay. Does anybody understand that?
We
Want
don't
to
use
take
the
a
word
crack at it?
stakeholders anymore because it's offensive to tribal nations, but you know.
Yeah.
Those folks, yes.
So, yeah, and so being politically incorrect, I'll use the word stakeholder for this time because I don't know what else to say, but it is interesting. Your owners, again, not all stakeholders or owners, because think about it. I wish I had the diagram because I have another diagram that shows the difference. Stakeholders in your system, in your district could be your teachers, right? They have a stake in what's happening in the district.
They can be vendors to the district. They can be all sorts of people
They could be
that have an interest in what happens here financially or
staff.
some other reason. But they're not necessarily the people who've delegated their vote to us, are, given us authority through their vote.
But they may also have been, they may very well be.
They can be both.
Yeah, you're a
It can be a
taxpayer, you work-
stakeholder
yeah.
and a,
Yeah,
but Debbie's point is not all stakeholders are owners.
Might be one of those questions that we sort of put a pin in and come back to and dig into a little bit more.
Yeah. It is interesting. You could be a stakeholder and an owner. If you have a teacher, stakeholder, but they live in one of your towns, owner. Yeah. So, but not all of your stakeholders live in your district towns. So
Are
that's.
voters stakeholders?
Yeah, we'll get to that, Alan.
Do you want to make note of that? We can come back to that.
I also put it in my notes too, so.
It's a good question. So again, the board maintains its focus on results and outcomes rather than the day-to-day management, and the board stays future focused while the CEO is very much present focused. Board members, when talking with staff, must always be aware of this line of authority. In doing so, they can freely interact with anyone about anything at any times, because sometimes people wonder on a policy governance board, well, can I interact with anybody if I'm only supposed to be, my point of contact as the CEO? Does that give me liberty and freedom to talk to other people, like my teachers and the principals? Yes, it does. Absolutely. And that's one of the frequently asked questions. I think it's number 5. It'll go into descriptions of how that happens. It's absolutely fine to interact with others in the district. It's just you can't instruct them. You can't give them direction. You can only do that to Patrick, to the CEO. Okay.
thank you.
Does that answer the questions? I'm trying to think, and then in terms of your question, Mike, if your owners are very much concerned with something that has to do with the management and operations, then I would refer them straight to the superintendent, or what I would do actually is refer them to the proper chain of communications. Like if it's an issue that has to do with a classroom, then I would ask that they approach the classroom teacher to give their input, if it's a question or comment or a suggestion. And then if it has to do more with like the management, the operations of a school building, I would direct them to the principal for that. And if it was more of a level systems management operations question, then I would refer them to the CEO. Because they're the ones that have that information and the knowledge. And it just keeps the chain of communication clear. And it helps to just keep the roles and responsibilities clear. And that's, again, the way I would coach any board, whether you're a policy governance board or not. The chain of communications is really important, that everybody understands what that looks like and how you refer concerned citizens, where you refer them to.
If an individual or a group of individuals went through that chain of commands and felt like still their needs weren't met, then what happens?
So what happens then? And this is one of the reasons you want to try to make sure that you use that chain of command.
That's what we're asking.
That's what we're asking. Yeah, that's the question.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if anybody knows the answer to that. In rare cases, you may have a hearing. Ultimately, that could be what happens, that you have a quasi judicial role as a board. It could be a student issue, it could be a staff issue, right? So if you are in that position, the less information you know going into that situation, the better. So it doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen. So that's how complaints do get directed up from, the bottom through the principals and to the superintendent, and eventually, if the person is dissatisfied with what the CEO has to say, then they can ask for a hearing with the board, in which case you are asked to play a quasi judicial role. And we actually have, I don't want to focus on that right now because we do have to move on to committees, but there is a webinar on our VSBA website that talks about quasi judicial hearings as a board and what that looks like. So it's just something to take a look at if that is something, especially if you have a hearing coming up, which I hope you don't, but.
I think we've had 3 hearings and
Have
it
you?
resulted in 2 negative votes on our, but I think that's how the taxpayers are having their complaints registered by going to the ballots. And they're registering that way. So it's kind of confusing. On one hand, we're saying, yeah, absolutely communicate with folks, but then on the other hand, no, because you're going to be a quasi judicial setting, you can't communicate with them. So how do you strike that balance with a community that doesn't feel like they're being heard by the administration, and they don't necessarily feel we've heard tonight. They don't feel like we're hearing them either. So how do we maintain our focus in a policy governance situation in this climate?
And can I just add to that too, the principle of holism. That's one thing I, as a new board member, I don't want to overstep my, my boundaries. So how do I interact with my community and follow that principle of holism? It just seems like a gray area.
And it's very much a case by case basis, right? I mean, it's hard to generalize the situation. Again, I don't want to.
Yeah, I know.
These
are great questions.
And they're very important questions. I always coach new board members to listen attentively to the issue, listen to the speaker. You're being a good listener and saying how hard this must be or how you understand this is a challenge for them. Be a sympathetic listener and then think about where you want to direct them to. Because you as a board member, you can't possibly know everything that goes on in the district. So, but what you should know is at what point in the organization should you direct that person to?
I think we're also talking about 2 levels of public feedback here. I think what you're referring to, Debbie, is sort of very specific personal complaints about particular details. I think other folks here are talking about more global community feedback and how do we channel that to the administration, understand what their response is, and then weigh that against our overarching goals. I think those are 2 different dynamics.
Yeah.
The quasi judicial thing, I think is really a tool for very specific issues. But I think people here are struggling more with the broader public feedback over the bigger issues. How do we act as the ownership linkage to the administration and monitor the response?
And demonstrate accountability while we're doing it.
Right. Well, and I think a lot of what you're doing around the budget is perfectly appropriate. I asked Mike earlier, are you having community forums in the context of revising your budgets? Do you have listening tours? Do you do that kind of do you ask for your owner's input into, okay, well, we have a failed budget. Now what do we do? That's an important piece of this, is to make sure that you listen to the owners. Again, you're not going to be able to please everyone, and your owners are only going to have a certain perspective, whereas you as a board member will have more perspective. You'll have a broader perspective about what's happening in the district. So you'll have to make your best informed decisions about the budget, the revisions. But yeah, it's perfectly appropriate to engage with your community members. In fact, it's necessary, and I would argue not with your owners, and not just around the budget. That's the obvious time when boards tend to do it, but we should be doing it always. We should always be listening and soliciting input from as broad of a base of owners as we can get. That's going to make it a lot easier.
What I've seen is that's become a lot more difficult since consolidation.
Yeah.
Before consolidation, it was much more community town oriented where people, I think, were really engaged on that level.
Yeah.
And then post consolidation, it just changed and that feel, that vibe is gone.
There's a disassociation.
Mhm.
With the board.
Yeah.
So, and I also just follow up. I like this idea, but I'm still struggling with this idea of going out, seeking community feedback, acting as this says, as an informed voice and agent of the owners, but feeling muted. Right? If the community are saying, we want to change X, Y, and Z, and that's the sentiment, but it's not our job as the board to direct what should be changed. I worry that we can do all the listening in the world, but the community then is talking to a brick wall because now we're not allowed to say or direct what the community wants on that granular level. And I'm not necessarily arguing that we should be able to either. I'm trying to understand how can this system effectively work so that we can truly engage with the community and then also have a chance that that informed voice gets to the right place, but in a way that isn't means as ends. And I'm really at a loss for how we do that. And I have a feeling the community feels that too.
Liz?
I mean, I definitely appreciate my question, and what I've come to feel and see is that we can set up the circumstances such that what we hear the community wants and their priorities are possible. So I feel like that's where the future focus is that, I mean, so I feel like, so that's where, so we get the input there. And then Krista was awesome at doing a lot of theming. So all of the comments, they were very, like a lot of comments that, like if we put out a thought exchange right now or some kind of survey about the budget, that if we, or the forum, all of this input was very specific, and then it can be themed, and then that can be used to create priorities for the district and creating the circumstances for a district to thrive going forward. It's not a change it today, it's a change it long-term visioning type. Like what barriers are in the way? Why are these challenges for us? What's the big picture? So I don't think that's necessarily really an answer to your question, but I do think that it's a lot about a lot of theming work on what we're here. Maybe that, I don't know.
What do you think, Patrick, as our CEO? I'm curious to hear what you think about this kind of paradox between feedback that owners want to provide to the board about operations and management, and how can the board handle that while being loyal, maybe is the word, to policy governance? How would you feel about that?
I think about policy 2.8, communication and support to the board. So if the board is hearing consistent messages from the community about a particular topic or multiple topics, I think it's appropriate for the board to direct me to bring information about that topic and dig into understand the why.
Right.
Behind whatever it is the issue was that was raised.
Yeah.
And then I have a responsibility under policy to deliver that information, to help the board become the informed agent.
Right. All of these answers to your questions are in your written policies. And I think I'm going to move on to that next slide, because under policy governance, you have basically three board core functions. Ownership linkage, which we've talked about, policy development, and policy monitoring. So what I find interesting about these three core functions is they all have something to do with policy, right? Your ownership linkage, the policy is the ends policy. That's where you're getting the wishes and the expectations of your owners, what they want the district to be. And you are putting that down into your global ends policy, right? Your policy development work is pretty much done. You have your policies. When you became a policy governance board, somebody had to sit down and write those policies, right? So you've done that. Now you can always revise your policies as you see fit. And then the third part is the policy monitoring. And that's something that I know you do through your policy monitoring reports at each meeting. So, the way a board communicates with itself, as well as with its CEO, is through the policies. Everything should be written down in a policy. All right, and that we don't, again, I wish we had more time, but that goes to another principle that we didn't talk about, which is the principle of any reasonable interpretation, okay? And that's what you see on your policy monitoring reports, is the interpretation of the policy. And that is basically taking the policy and putting it into language that the board feels comfortable with. And that anybody who sees the policy as written could provide a reasonable interpretation of that policy. And so, again, a lot of these answers to your questions, they all are in your policies. It's the question is, you have to be familiar with these policies, and you have to be really good about doing your policy monitoring reports. And we're going to look at one to demonstrate how this works. So we talked about committees within policy governance. This is our next topic. First of all, does policy governance allow for the existence of committees? Yeah, Mike says yes. Steve, does policy governance allow for it?
I sure hope so.
Because
We've done that for the last year, I think it better.
It sure does.
We need a committee to address our policy governance.
It's true.
Policy governance does give permission to this idea of having committees. It's perfectly fine. It does not require a board to have a committee, and it certainly doesn't dictate what kind of committees you need to have. Our policy governance board has never had a committee. We've never deemed it necessary. We're a small board of 5. We just felt like we could get our work done at our regular board meetings through our monitoring reports. We didn't feel that we had the need to do it, but some policy governance boards do, and that's fine. How do you know that this is allowed to have a committee on your board, or to have more than one committee? I don't know how many committees you have.
It's in our policies.
It's in your policies. Which policy? Forget. 4.6, board committee structure. So there you go. There's the answer. So if somebody were to come up to you and say, hey, I don't know about this, but are we allowed to have a committee? Yes, you are. And look, it's in your policy. It's 4.6. What does 4.6 say? Can somebody read it out loud?
The committee is a board committee only if its existence and charge comes from the board, regardless of whether board members sit on the committee. Unless otherwise stated, the committee ceases to exist as soon as its task is complete.
Okay, very good. So you have a policy that allows you to have committees on your board. Are you following their policy? Are you following this policy that was just read? You are, and how do you know you're following that policy?
Monitoring report.
The monitoring report, very good. When was your last monitoring report on that policy?
I don't believe we've done.
You have. May of 2023. You did.
4.6.
Of 4.6. Yep, board committee structure. You did a monitoring report of somebody by the name of B. Lane. Bailey. Yeah. I think that's in your packet. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so I wanted you to see what that monitoring report looks like. Now, What makes a committee successful? There's 7 essential elements to a committee. Running out of time here, I realize I have about 5 or 10 minutes left. So each of these is essential to having a successful committee. And this is regardless of whether you're a policy governance board or not, okay? Charge, what is the objective or purpose of having the committee? Is it clearly articulated and do you have a clear outcome or deliverable that this committee is expected to deliver? The authority, what authority does your committee have? Does it make decisions or does it just make recommendations? Timeline, how long is needed to do the committee's work? Are there deliverables that define the length of time? Like some deliverables will have a natural timeline built into them, right? A good rule of thumb is that a committee has as a timeline a maximum of a year. And that as you reorganize as a board each March, that you really take a look at your committees and decide if they should continue. And if so, does the charge need to change at all? Okay, because committees shouldn't be existing in perpetuity. They should have a timeline. Membership, it should be clear in your mind who's on this committee. Will it be board members, owners, staff, students? And how are these members put onto the committee? Are they appointed by the board? Are they self-selected? In the case of a board committee, maybe you self-select. I want to serve on this committee. Logistics means really about your meetings, a committee's meetings. What is the meeting going to be? Is it going to be monthly? Is it going to be weekly? How long are your meetings going to last? The time of day, the location, is it going to be a virtual? Is it going to meet virtually? Is it going to meet in person? Is it going to be hybrid? So these are all things that really need to be considered when you set up a committee. The process, how are the decisions going to be made on this committee? Are you going to use, say, Robert's rules for small boards? Because there is a separate set of Robert's rules for small boards. You guys are a large board because you're more than 10, but you could decide as a committee, let's follow the Robert's rules for small boards. Who gets to decide who's going to be the leader of your committee? Do you have a leader of your committee? Does your board appoint that leader or does the committee select their own leader? So these are all questions that need to be thought about and considered when you form a committee. And then the last one is your role of the administration. And really the admin role is to support, not to lead your committees. Admin staff provides information usually, and they usually support the logistics of your committee. So committees, in short, are not accidental. They're very intentional. They're very purposeful. They have a reason for existing with a clear charge. They do the work of the board and they have deliverables with a certain time frame. So knowing that, take a look at your policy that allows you to have a committee and tell me or tell yourselves, do you see the elements in your policy? Do you see all 7 of those elements in your policy? 4.6. Does your policy speak to each of these 7 elements, let's say? What do you think? What elements do you see? There are some elements in your policy. I saw some.
I don't think we have role of administration in there. But other than that, I think we have a version of those other pieces in them.
Just in the policy, Liz, that you see, not the interpretation. Don't look at the interpretation, just look at the policy.
It doesn't talk much about the process, does it?
it definitely talks about charge. You see the word charge, right? It says a committee is a board committee only if its existence and charge come from the board. Talks a little bit about your timeline, right? In a very general sense. They cease to exist as soon as the task is completed, right? And membership. Vaguely, it talks very vaguely about your board member, regardless of whether board members sit on the committee or not. So the next part of your monitoring report, the one that was done in 2023, the first, just below your policies, the person that did this interpreted the policy. And that's, the interpretation is actually quite good. And they actually went a little bit farther. When they wrote the interpretation, they added a little bit more to what the policy said. I saw task, authority, timeline, and membership in your interpretation. I still didn't see anything about logistics, process, or role of administration. So that's kind of lacking. So here's what I would say. Go ahead, Liz.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, I think we've been addressing those in our charges, so I didn't realize that that should have been in the policy itself. I think when committees make a charge and then we get it approved by the full board, that's where, at least community engagement, where we've had our process and logistics go in there. So, I think that's what we've been doing.
Yeah, I think we put the cart after the horse.
Maybe.
But that's where it's
When we
supposed to be.
decided to make committees,
Mhm.
I think we looked at best practices for what committees should include. I think even on the VSBA website, there's some instructions on that. So we embedded that in the charges, but I can see how, you know, that probably ought to be embedded in the original, in the originating policy on how to actually form the committee.
So one thing that I offer you, and I think it was emailed to you earlier today or some point, is this tool that I find quite useful when you're establishing a new committee. It looks like this. It's called the board worksheet on planning a committee.
I think
And
that's what we were looking at.
So that basically has those 7 elements. And I would, when you talk about forming a new committee, or you could even do it with your existing committees, just see if you can answer each of these and describe them. Now, if you feel like I don't know how you're feeling about your policy right now as written, your board committee structure policy 4.6. But my question would be to you as a board is, are you happy with it the way it's currently written? Or do you think it's a little too vague and it could be a bit more robust? Like, should there be more to it? Does it say enough? Does it say too much? Does it not say enough? And if you decide as a board that you kind of don't think it says enough and you'd like to maybe beef it up a little bit, what I would suggest or advise is that you take a look at some other policy governance boards' policies on committees for some guidance. And then modify it, amend your policy, and you know how to amend policies. So the one I would, again, I'm not telling you this is what you should do, but I know that there is some question that I heard when we were planning this retreat, that sometimes we're a little confused about the authority and accountability of committees, right? On board committees. So if some of that confusion is, I mean, if some of that confusion is because your policy is too vague, then amend your policy. And have a look at Essex Westford's policy on board committees. Look at Barstow's. We have a much longer policy written about board committees, and thinking maybe that would serve your purpose better.
Liz?
I'm sorry. Thank you. And I know we're short, but one thing that we've been going back and forth on the entire time that we've been a district is topic based, because I guess I've been thinking of committees as an opportunity for community engagement, right? So we've gone back and forth a lot on topic based committees versus school based committees, and I just think that will resonate with that we've had community members that's been a big topic for us for a long time. Whether they should be school based or topic based, and I was wondering if you had thoughts on that. I mean, they could be both. I don't know. That it's just been something that we've dedicated a lot of conversation and time to.
Liz, what do you mean by school-based?
So like, I guess, I mean, at this point, I think with our current circumstances, that would mean town-based, school-based, like a Mausd, right? Like all the work that you did with Nancy. I mean, the intent was to get, and we checked in with principals about it over the years, getting a school-based, does that make sense, Steve? Do you kind of remember?
Are you referring to like local advisory councils?
Something like that, yeah, that the write-up about that there would be a school-based committee or council, right? The local advisory council. That's, I think, what might have been the name for it. And that was at the moment, I think, a way that we were thinking about reaching out to communities is having committees that met in each school. Or that were very, I don't know, never mind. I'm sorry. I might be totally.
Are these board committees, Liz, or are they affiliated more with something that the administration has set up?
No,
We were, go ahead, Steve, sorry.
yeah, we were, I think it was an ownership linkage
Okay.
tool that we were considering and are still considering. We've looked at a couple different times.
Yeah.
But committee work, I think, has been isolated to trying to help the board do its work.
Right. Not
Because we were feeling overloaded trying to do all of these tasks in our business meetings.
in your board meetings,
Yeah.
which is where you have to get your business done, right? So that is where committees can really serve a useful purpose. When it can help you do the work of the board that you just don't have time to do during regular business meetings. Just be careful they don't duplicate the work of the board and don't when a committee does the work, you don't want to have to redo the work of the committee, right? The board wants to trust the committee. You're giving it the authority to do something on behalf of the board. And the last thing you want to do is to have that committee come back to you with, say, a recommendation, and the board just questions it all. Then what's the purpose of having the committee?
Yeah, that happens a lot.
That does happen a lot. So that, again, that goes to, it's really important to have a clear charge of that committee and to know what authority that committee has. It has to be intentional. It has to be purposeful. It can't happen accidentally. And the more clarity you can have around that, these topics, these elements on your committee, the better it'll function. So if you feel like community engagement is one of those things that you just don't have enough time to do as a board, and you want to submit a committee or create a committee around that, then go for it.
Yeah, we have a community engagement committee.
Oh, you do?
I think we were just, that committee was actually considering whether or not we should also have school-based advisory council.
Oh, okay.
So I think it's a kind of a side topic. It's not
Yeah, I agree.
necessarily directly related to this.
Right, I agree. It's a little bit different. I agree. Okay, I'm very aware of your time because I know you have more of a meeting and then you have executive session, so I don't want to take more of your time, which you've already been very generous giving, but is this helpful? Does this help you understand a little bit more about authority and accountability under policy governance as a system and also how it pertains specifically to your committees? And I know, as I told you, there was going to be lingering questions, probably questions that don't have answers. So what I would propose, because I don't want you to leave, I don't want you to feel frustrated and like I'm trying to dodge answering questions, because I'm certainly not, is to please, who's the recording secretary here? Or is somebody, or Erin?
Yeah, I do have other notes too.
You do.
Go ahead.
Feel free to put those unanswered questions into an email to me. We can also talk, Erin and Mike and Patrick and I can talk about what additional training topics we could consider doing over the summer. I also want to send to you all tomorrow the brown dog. Well, I know you have some information about brown dog consulting, but do you know about the self-paced module for, yeah, you do.
Some board members have done that when we went through the training with Sue Morganson last time, but
Okay.
there's a number of new board members that would have done that.
Highly recommend that module, either hiring Susan to come back and train the whole board. Or if that's not fiscally or if that's not possible or time-wise, asking your new board members to do that self-paced module, online modules is really, I think it's one of the better ones out there. And worth the time doing it. It's something you can do over the summer too, when things are slower. In theory.
Can I ask just?
Yeah.
A related but unrelated question? About what percentage of Vermont school districts are using
Policy
policy
governance.
governance?
It's a really good question. We've tried, both the VSBA and the VSA have tried to come up with that answer. We did a survey in November, I think it was. We asked superintendents to self-identify if they were policy governance, and I think what we got back, and we didn't get 100% return on the questionnaire, but it's looking like 7 SUs are using it, and within that, some district boards. So maybe 15 to 20 is an estimate. And when they say using it, that's a big variation too. Like, they may have adopted policy governance as a system of governance, but they're not really using it the way it should be used.
And then do other states also use this?
Yep.
Or is it?
Policy governance has been around since the 70s. And it's not just used in school board governance, it's actually used in all types of organizations. It's used for nonprofit boards, it's used on corporate boards. It's has a big following in Canada, and actually some Western European countries do use it as well. Yeah, it's been around for coming up on close to 50 years. And I do know of other states, Colorado, they have a significant number of school boards that use policy governance. I do like policy governance as a system. I think that the drawbacks to it, if you're wondering about that, is it takes a lot of training and it takes investment in making sure your board members and your CEO understand what it is and can be faithful to the system. When you have a lot of board turnover or a superintendent that turns over, that's one of the vulnerabilities to a policy governance system. And we're seeing that a lot in Vermont. Board turnover is happening a lot. And so that's really been hard for policy governance boards. That's what happened in my policy governance board. It was very strong, but it's become harder because of the board turnover and not making the necessary investment in training in you know, for the new board members.
Yeah.
All
So if
right.
there's other questions. I know, Liz, I see your hand up.
Just something to add to the list of questions for another time is that I haven't been able to follow it, but isn't the state doing something around governance standards in education? So what is that gonna look like? And is that gonna, like, you know, so I just wonder how that will affect
That's
What we're doing.
that's something we've been reviewing in our committee,
Have you?
and we're probably gonna try to see if we can shoehorn the self-assessment tool
Yeah.
into the retreat.
So which self-assessment?
The
one-
VSBA's self-assessment tool for the associated with the
With the
board, the board
standards.
self-assessment tool.
Oh, I have another tool that aligns with the new governance standards.
That's what I'm talking.
Oh, that's what you're talking, okay,
Yes.
yeah. Yeah, so that's absolutely right. There are district quality standards that were adopted last year. They go into effect in July of 2025. One subset of those standards are governance standards. And there's 14 standards that boards are going to be expected to be in compliance with by July of 2025, which is just around the corner. When I crosswalk those standards with policies and policy governance, I'm feeling like if you are a policy governance board that's really truly using policy governance, you're gonna be in very good shape with
Yeah,
those new
okay.
governance standards.
From what I could see, we're doing it,
Yeah.
we're doing everything, but
Yeah.
whether we're checking that we're doing everything
Right,
is probably where we're lacking.
right,
You know,
the monitoring
the
part.
monitoring of our, and adjusting, you know, for feedback
Yep,
sort of thing, I think is where it looks, just from my vantage point, having scanned it, that we're in.
yep. You are doing it and you're not accounting for it, I think is what you're saying.
Probably.
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
probably the-
And that's what the the governance standards are going to be asking boards to do, is to really annually evaluate itself to see if it is doing the things that it should be doing. There's a lot in there about self-assessment, and we're building the scales now for how we measure proficiency to the new governance standards. So there's gonna be a lot more of that coming out this summer. And at the fall conference, we'll be spending some time on that as well. That was a good question, Liz. Thank you for asking it, because it is very relevant to your work, all of our work as boards, those standards.
Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
It was very helpful.
I hope so. I hope I didn't leave you more frustrated than when, when I started.
Did a good job if you leave us with questions.
Yes,
That's good.
Well, and honestly, you know what? I think you moved the needle tonight. I honestly am gonna say this because I think at the beginning, you didn't even know what you didn't know. And now you're kind of getting to know what you don't know, and that's progress. So, I mean, Susan, we'll follow up.
I will. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron, thank you to whoever put this all together.
Yeah, that was
because
our
this is-
friend Jennifer.
Yay, Jennifer.
But
To have it all in one place.
I knew it was a big request when I asked it, but she banged it out. So thank you, Jennifer.
It's also on the website.
It is.
Well, I
but-
know, but you have to scroll and cut and, yeah, no, this is nice. Stress old people who like paper. That's really, really nice.
Yeah, if you don't get it, there's a.
I think there's extra.
Right,
yellow,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yes, so we'll need a.
Barb needs it.
I got you.
I have some of them.
Pink is too close. to you. Right here.
Okay, so we're gonna get cracking right on.
Yep.
So the next part of our agenda is our executive limitations monitoring. So that's a financial report. Does anybody have questions about the financial report in the agenda packet?
I do. On page 10, then there was a note of the financial report. There was a note that we were expecting to encumber just under 1.7 million for building improvements, and then it gave us what the rough ending fund balance was. Can we talk about what we're encumbering that for?
Because I mostly heard you. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Do you want me to repeat?
I would love to.
Okay, page,
Floyd, you might actually have to step up here if we're gonna hear your
My problem
response.
is I have a.
low battery. So page 10 of the financial report, there was a note on the expected encumbrances of the 2.6 million or something. And so there was slated just under 1.7 million for building improvements. And I'm
Right.
curious what that is for.
Part of that is for the matching funds going to the ESSER grant for the air handler unit in Mount A Gym, as well as the HVAC at Beaman.
Additionally, it's the balance of the parking lot at Moncton. So we did all of the parking lot, but didn't pave it last year because we weren't positive we'd gotten all of the springs. And we didn't want to put pavement on top and then have to tear it up. Having come through the winter and mud season, we feel like we're well on top of that, so we're gonna pave that this spring as well.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions on that report?
On some good news. The anticipated change, we were running about 92,000 short on revenue from the sped mainstream block grant. That is, you'll see on the next month that we are only 11,000 short, and that's the final number, that they have finally caught that up, but we've been running 92 short all year. So, and that was a computation struggle on the state's end. And we were getting the monthly promise to have it, but they couldn't. I think they're they're as underwater as we are on a lot of things. And that will clarify this month.
Thank you. Any questions on the superintendent's report? Or comments?
I liked the pictures. When do we get the one for April?
So that would be, I think they lag a month, right? So at the next board meeting.
Bummer, I missed Floyd's notes about the special dinner lunch.
But it's okay, some of us signed
Sorry.
up for it and they postponed it because of the snowstorm.
So what ended up happening with the special chefs who came in?
We're here. We had a snow day and we tried to get invites out to we did get invites out to the board as a whole to come on over and enjoy it. It was spectacular. I would invite you to come to any of the schools for lunch. It's the best $5 lunch in the county. And they love, the staff loves feeding adults and sharing what they're doing.
Any other comments on that report? Okay, we'll move right along into the board management and governance section of our agenda. And the first one is an action to approve committee charges. I guess my first question though is, are committees ready to do that?
So at our last policy and governance committee meeting, we approved sending the charge to the board for consideration.
So that's one, and I know community engagement was ready. How about finance and facilities?
I don't think we're ready. We just got the draft from Brad.
We had a good draft from Brad. He
Yeah.
put some real time into it. It looks good, but especially given the conversation today about clarity there, given the policy itself, I think it would make sense to allow us to chew that over and bring it to the
Have
next
one
school
more
board.
meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Be good.
Is community engagement or policy and governance also feeling like they'd like that time to,
No, I think we're ready.
you're ready?
Yeah.
Okay. How about community engagement? What do you-
think we need.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think so.
okay.
Yeah.
So then this action to approve committee charges might just be action to approve policy and governance committee charge.
Or we could tackle that with the other ones.
So just table it until,
Yeah, because it's not linked right now. People haven't had a chance to look at it
Yeah.
ahead of time.
Yeah.
So I think if we wanted to, if everybody was ready next time, we
Yeah.
could do them with some advance
okay,
reading.
okay. So can we then
I'm gonna
just,
make a motion to table this.
Yep. please? So Steve, move to table this
I'll
item. Second from Mike. All those in favor of moving to table this item, you say aye.
Aye.
Is that an aye? Okay. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. The next action item is 4.5 Board Member Code of Conduct Monitoring Report from Brad. Brad is not with us tonight and he's traveling, so either we can look at it and approve it, or we could table it until he's here. We've done it both ways in the past if the person isn't here to answer questions on it.
I would move to table it.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, so Kathy moves to table it. Is there any other discussion on that? No. All those in favor of tabling this monitoring report until the person who wrote it is here, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. The next is an update from Finance and Facilities Committee, which is linked, but does anyone from that committee want to speak to what happened at last meeting?
Not much of anything, right? It was 30 minutes before the full board
Yeah.
meeting, so we mostly had some community discussion.
Okay.
So it was a chance for feedback and that considered the most of it.
And we elected Mike as our.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that's the most important, exactly.
Big deal. How about policy and governance?
Yeah, I mean, it was the same sort of thing. We just reorganized. I was appointed chair and we approved the charge to go to the board. That was it. So there's a big agenda for next time.
Yeah. Yeah. And how about community engagement?
A lot of the same, you know, it was, I think, you know, we appointed you as our chair. And I think there was just a lot of like, okay, we gotta focus on the bigger meeting that was ahead of us. So it was just a very compacted discussion. Would you add anything?
I would agree, and I think it was, how do we connect with our communities?
Yeah.
About the budget
Yeah,
specifically.
yeah.
Okay, so more to come from those committees.
Aaron.
So one question I think that came up was, is much more of a statement than a question, was that it's difficult for folks who want to go to more than one committee
Yeah.
meeting. If we stack them all at 5:30 on the night of another board meeting, then people don't feel like their voice is being heard in multiple places.
Mhm. Yeah, that's not usual either. Like, we don't tend to want to stack a board business meeting on top of a committee meeting. And certainly an independent committee could elect to do it a different night or at a different place. I mean, you're not married to here and at that time. We did it for consistency, so people could prepare and predict when their meetings would be, but if your committee decides that Monday nights are better and it's better in Moncton, then so be it. That's where you are.
And maybe move it around.
Yeah, yeah, and we can certainly discuss as a full board how we do that as well, if we were interested in being more migratory for committee meetings. Okay. The next item is a discussion, so the next steps for the fiscal year 25 budget. And for this, I really wanted to approach this next round of budget building a little bit differently than we've done the first two. And that's really built on the rationale that we've heard a lot from the community, and there's a misalignment between, you know, this idea of educational values and what's coming from the community and then what's being utilized, right? And so, as we heard tonight, we're a board of trustees, we're meant to be an informed agent, and with that knowledge, make decisions that are best for the organization. I think one issue we've had is we have a lot of new board members, right, who are coming in and running to catch up on all the things we have, and new things are being added all the time. But also, we haven't really dedicated any time specifically to asking information for understanding, which is sort of the point Patrick made tonight about 2.8, where we haven't asked questions directly to get answers back that help us balance or understand or be more informed about what's action and what's being done as action in the schools and balancing that with our community expectations. So tonight I'd really want to approach this discussion and the budget discussion in general in sort of 3 steps. So first, I'd like to hear from Patrick. He has some new information available about what the budget is going to look like, or it does look like at the moment. So we'll hear from him, and then we'll sort of go through next steps of, is this new information something we want to build on? And then go through what we need in terms of justification for the board to make an informed decision about this proposed budget idea. And we can jump into that. And then the third thing would be talking about community engagement. So how we do this really well this next go round. So I'm gonna turn it over to Patrick so he can sort of give us this brief overview of what has changed between the last budget failure and today.
So as we've done for years, this is not a new sort of financial challenge. We've had financial challenges for a while. And what we've done consistently, which we talked some about at the last meeting, is this time of year specifically, when we learn of attrition, we have conversations about should we or should we not fill a position that becomes vacated? Because not filling a position is a lot easier than having to issue RIF notices in terms of managing the financial impact. So it is not the preferred path to vote down multiple budgets to get late in the season where we have more information about what attrition next year might bring. However, we are late in the process and we do have information now that we wouldn't typically have at this point in the budget building process. And the timing of this next vote and when contracts are issued and when they're due back, et cetera, is really what provides some of that information. So that being said, knowing that we failed our second vote and the potential to be seeking additional reductions to get a third budget passed, I found what amounts to about $575,000 in savings that doesn't require a single written, which I think is a great thing. I know that that is part of what is really hard in our community right now. And as you all know, there's been a lot of effort to try and not have to get to the point of issuing any RIFs. And then the next step would be, the next best thing is, okay, if we've had to issue them, let's try to not have to call on any of those RIFs that we did have to issue. So that this savings would allow us to not need to act on any of the RIFs that are out there. And it does come from not filling some positions. And we also have some new information about student needs next year, which have an impact on services and related costs associated with that as well. So that $576,914 in savings comes from not filling 1.0 math instructional coaching position that was being vacated. And so these are all, of course, in addition to everything that we talked about in terms of positions not being filled to get to that 9.99 budget that we saw last time. So this is all above and beyond those things, which we can go over.
Is that like if that's not that 1.0, is that somebody that works directly with children, or is that like a coach for one of the teachers?
It's an instructional coach, so a coach for one of the teachers.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have 0.6 guidance counselor that's being vacated that we could not fill. And just to recall, we added guidance counselors with ESSER funds that we kept in the budget. So even absorbing this 0.6 vacated guidance position leaves us with more guidance counselors than we had pre-pandemic. So it doesn't even bring us back down to where we were. We're still above where we were pre-pandemic.
But with that person, are we adequately able to meet the needs of the population that we serve?
I mean, that's always a balance, right? So I would say we have, without filling this 0.6, we have what will be considered appropriate levels of guidance staffing. Some would argue even more than what many districts would have for the number of students that we have. We could probably add 5 guidance counselors and they would all be busy doing great work. And so that concept of adequacy is in the eye of the beholder, I think, in some regards. I think a case would be made that yes, we do. Likewise, we have a social worker that wants to reduce their time. So 0.4 of an FTE social worker is some attrition we could take advantage of. Again, we added, for years and years, we had 1.0 social worker that worked pretty much exclusively at Mount Abe. Between general fund and ESSER funds, we've added 2.0 more. So we've tripled the number of social workers that we have in recent years. So we can absorb this 0.4 FTE and still have more than twice the social workers we had pre-pandemic.
What kinds of work does the social worker do versus the guidance counselor?
Social workers engage much more deeply with families, sometimes make home visits. So, and more sort of a holistic approach, I guess. Whereas guidance counselors are more of a universal kind of support. A lot of students receive support from guidance counselors, actually deliver universal instruction around social skills. So It's a difference between sort of universal versus intensive kinds of support, if we want to think about it that way. And then we have 2.3 special educator positions. 1.3 of those have been vacated all year. So we would not fill those positions going forward, which we've been unable to fill this year. And then there's one other special educator that is leaving that we would not fill. Obviously, I've been talking closely with Beth as the Director of Student Reports and looking at student needs, the number of special educators we would have remaining after absorbing this and where they would be assigned. And she's confident that we would have the staffing needed in absorbing those 2.3 positions. Above and beyond that, some reductions in out-of-district placement costs, reduction in need for interpreter costs, reduction in special education travel, and some reduction in physical therapy costs. Some of those costs are being reassigned to some grant funds instead, so that alleviates some pressure out of the general fund in that way. So not all of those are necessarily services decreasing, but shifting where the funds are coming from. And so those total that $576,914, which brings the tax impact to the most impacted town of Bristol down to 7.6 will be the tax impact in Bristol. And just for historical purposes, if we use the Bristol example, the last 5 years, all of which we've had budgets that pass, last year's tax increase after CLA was 4.08. The year before that was actually a decrease of 0.6%. The year before that was 8.37% increase. The year before 8.21%, and then 4.26. So that 7.6 is at or below some recent years increases that have passed. And similar for the other towns as well.
I have a process question, especially after having all this conversation tonight about policy governance. I'm hearing you lay out a SMART plan that you have for reducing our budget. I also heard some folks in the audience talking about their concerns, and I'm wondering what the process is for us as a board to be like, are we getting feedback on what people need? Like, where does that fit? Like, I guess I don't really understand what our role is to be the conduit between community and the budget, because it sounds like you've got a plan for a budget that you're trying to make work, but it also sounds like people are really, term I would use is pissed off. And I'm not sure why, because I'm new here. So what do we do?
So that's part of the reason why I've sort of laid out in 3 steps what we're gonna do, so
Yeah.
that we can sort of get to that piece of how do we
But-
marry these 2 ideas together. So when go ahead.
So
if
my
you want.
curiosity though is that it sounds like, Patrick, you have a plan for what we're gonna cut already. Do we get to inform you at all with what that plan is?
So part of what's different about this process, and it sort of falls into the desperate times call for desperate measures category, I think. Typically, the board would set the target for the budget that I would then go and find a way to meet. In light of this information that's been presented and the situation that we were in and talking with Aaron, it made sense to share this information that we have. You get to still set the target. You can use this information to set the target or not. But it felt important to share that.
That makes sense that we get to set the target, but we don't get to respond, like, we don't have a role then actually in being a voice for the people who are saying, here are the things that we really want to see, it sounds like. Like, we can say this is how much we want the budget to be cut by, but we can't be like, we're really hearing that people are feeling frustrated about the costs at the central office. I'm just like distilling Front Porch Forum. I can also tell you about all the cats that are missing on Front Porch Forum, like, same thing. No, I'm serious. It is like all missing cats and like people mad about the budget. It's what those 2 things. So we don't have a common, we don't play a role in what people want to have happen with the budget. If we just tell you what percentage.
There's no restriction on us having a conversation about anything.
I know, but it sounds like.
And if we want to, as a board, if that conversation is compelling enough, want to suggest that we make some recommendation to the superintendent. There's nothing stopping us from doing that, even under policy governance.
And I think Aaron's chair notes listed some good, like, discussion for generating some ideas.
Yep.
Okay, so we can solicit some of that information and then we can advise you on it and for your guidance as you're doing the third budget. Like, will you take into account our recommendations? When I say take into account, I mean that quite broadly, as in you hear them and then you get to decide what you want to do with them, whether that's nothing or everything.
Right, and so that becomes the challenge, right? It's sort of the means versus ends and in terms of the board responsibility versus what's delegated to the superintendent, which is where we sort of dance a little bit. I think historically, the conversations that have surfaced at the board table are of course taken into serious consideration. Are they always adhered to? No, but there's usually a conversation and explanation about why that would sort of be contraindicated given what we're trying to build in terms of systems or structures and or supports that we're putting into place. So yeah, it's a roundabout way of answering the question, but I think that's the dynamic that we're sort of wrestling with, is board responsibility versus superintendent responsibility and where that blends.
It does, I know it's easy to say what we had before COVID, but what we have now is such a different beast. It makes me really nervous to see the positions of guidance and social work being decreased at this time, where I think we're hearing like our schools need more social emotional support, not of coaches, but of people working with our kids and helping kids through crisis and tough times. So seeing those two things as part of like, well, we haven't filled them, we might not. I feel a little worried about that.
Same with special education. And I don't know when is the appropriate time to say this, but the policy governance isn't actually based on any quality research. The only person who's really done research on it is Dan French, our former Secretary of Education, and his wasn't even based on solid research. He was just looking at dissertation abstracts. Like, there's no data to support this. And the practices that comes out of Atlanta, Georgia, like, this is the work, like, it's kind of killing me. It's really killing me today to be like, this is disembedding us from our community. And it's some of the pieces in there make sense, especially about like we can't overstep our role. Like one of the biggest problems with school boards is that we're either arguing with ourselves or trying to tell you what to do or trying to like hire and fire people. But this is like a whole nother level that feels like we've just completely like, y'all are over there. I'm sorry, I'm using my Southern words. I'm actually from Maine, but I'm so sorry. I don't know if there's I feel like I'm on the board, but I don't even know. I don't feel like I'm allowed to talk to anybody. I'm sorry. I realize this is like totally, I don't even think I'm supposed to be talking right now. Like, I think I'm out of order for Robert's rules, but I just am like, oh my gosh, like people are really mad and I don't know what I can even do about it. And it feels like, and we're basing it on something that has no basis in any research in ed policy or ed leadership. Like, I say this as somebody where like, this is what I do. And I know that I'm just one person. I'm not necessarily like very good at what I do, but to be like, this came from Dan French, like bless his heart, but like, how did one person end up changing what we're doing for the whole state? I'm sorry, I'm way out of, I'm sick break or something, I'm sorry.
What specific part are you talking about, Danielle?
What did you say?
Are you talking about policy and governance or?
Yeah, the policy governance, yes. Yeah, the model policy governance.
Thank you. So it's the policy governance model that you're having this sort of visceral reaction.
Yeah, to be like, no wonder we're in trouble. Like, I'm so sorry. I'm not, it's like, it's late for my brain and I'm like not thinking carefully before I say anything and I know better because I work in small communities, but yeah, it seems like, I guess I'll just go for it then you guys can decide if you want to uninvite me to be on the school board.
Well,
But-
what I will say is we have a lot of work we need to do.
I
It's
know.
not, that's a
I know.
big topic for
That is,
For-
you're right.
for another time.
Yes.
But
So
it's-
maybe I'm
really
raising my red flag,
have to get to this.
but I'm also saying like, we gotta do something.
I'm not trying to cut anybody off, but I'm assuming that folks are here to listen to how we're going to proceed with our.
We're not
Budget.
here with
Like you wanted
the
that.
budget being told to us without any input. We're not here for that.
We would like to
So-
hear what she has to say.
Okay, just 1 second. So I have a good layout for how I think we can get to sort of all these things that we're hearing from this side and
I'm
all the
sorry,
concerns
yeah.
that and it's not anything to be sorry about. It's how we're going to do this with the time we have in a really effective way. And we can't do it if we're contentious. We can't.
But we also can't do it with a policy governance model.
So I'm
can we
not gonna-
revisit that later.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. But today isn't that time.
Okay.
The policy and governance model may or may not be where this board wants to live. That's fine, we can discuss that. But the problem is today, how we're gonna get this budget to a place that balances what our community wants and how our superintendent and his team are enacting that.
Yes, and I hope you understand that in my discussion here is to say that I don't see how those two pieces fit together, and that's why I'm really trying to understand, knowing that you're having the discussion afterwards.
Yeah.
Of wanting to understand how we're going to engage
Yes.
people in the conversation.
Yes, that's how we do it.
Because I think I had these similar trepidations and maybe we've come to a place where thinking about really our role as like the informed agent
Yes.
comes into play. And I think Erin's structure that she sort of laid out might get to this, which is us doing a better job of understanding what justifications, what information we need beyond just the budget target that got us to that. So asking that of our superintendent to provide those justifications so that we can then share them more effectively with the community, so that they have a better sense of the rationale for where the budget comes from. And I think at least as a small step, right, that should do a lot. And it also doesn't necessarily skirt the current policy governance model that we have, in the sense that we're not dictating what those choices are, but we're seeking more robust justification, and we're pushing back on like the information we need to be able to recommend a budget, given the pressures and the supports that the community have. I don't know if that is gonna get us to a satisfying place, but it might get us closer.
So I'm hearing all of this, and it sort of mirrors my frustration with, I'm hearing from taxpayers, I'm hearing from parents and grandparents. And I've seen it firsthand in the elementary school at Beaman, that there are significant struggles in the school and there are special ed needs that aren't being met. So I don't have the information as a board member to be able to understand, are they being met or are they not being met? And what's the rationale behind it not being met? Or are they being met just at a minimal standard? So what I need as a board member is to know from the administration, before we propose a budget, are we meeting the needs? Because that's not what I'm hearing from anywhere in the community, that we are meeting the needs of the children and of the staff. So how do we get that information in honesty and an open, clear dialogue?
That's one of the things we can add to an ask from Patrick as far as the justification piece and asking for understanding. That's where that lives.
Right, and I thought I just asked that,
Yeah, no, that's great. Oh,
yeah.
I'll note it down, right?
And it didn't get back an answer. Well, yeah, we're meeting, or we've got
So-
more than some other districts, but is that meeting the needs of the population that we have?
So the purpose that I see tonight, and we can certainly add a meeting next week or the week after, right? We can meet as many times as we need to. We're just coming off of spring break, right? This is for us to generate ideas about what kind of information we need, help from Patrick and his admin team to address the community topics that we're fielding every single day. Because they're big and they're heavy and we might not dig to the bottom of it all, and we probably can't do all that work before we have to vote again.
I think we have to do that work.
I think we
before
have
vote
to
again. I don't
demonstrate
think we
that.
have a choice.
I think we have to demonstrate that we're doing a lot of that work, but there's no feasible way to dig all the way down to the bottom of the barrel everywhere. And also get to a place where our budget is gonna be put to bed.
Well, I don't think we've done our job.
I agree.
So,
That's what I'm saying, is I agree with you. I agree we haven't done our job.
so how do we get
And we
there?
have, exactly, how do we get there? How do we get there in the amount of time we have to not operate on an 87% of our current budget?
Maybe we have to
right?
just accept the fact. I mean, we're looking around us and there's another one tonight. Did anybody hear what her budget did?
I haven't heard yet.
I think maybe we have to accept the fact that forcing a budget through that doesn't meet the needs of the community or meet the needs of taxpayers, or both. Just because we've got a July 1 deadline, maybe we have to take that 87%. Maybe, you know, but it's a hit, I get it. But on the other hand, we can't continue year after year after year to shove this under the rug without addressing it.
I agree with you, yeah.
I have a concern about, that budget that you're referring to, the 87.
We all do. Believe me,
Yeah.
that's not what I want to see happen. But on the other hand, we can't just keep pushing these numbers through without getting to the bottom of the.
I agree with you. My concern would be the SEL programs and my question, I'm just gonna slide it in there. So maybe whenever you can get the information is what kind of interventions are there? What are the different levels? What are the tiers? What do we have? Because I, as a board member, don't know that, and I would like to. What's happening in each of the schools, and what are the resources that we allocate for that? Thank you.
I think, you know, we hear a lot of conversation too from the community about us being top heavy, like we hear this all the time. And I'm not sure if that's the thread that is preventing us from moving forward in this, but it's something we hear a lot. I'm not sure how to tackle that. But it's definitely the elephant in the room. And I think, yes, we do have a math coach position, but the rest of these people directly work with our kids. And so I don't know if this approach is even gonna be on the docket for some people to look at that. I also think this is great information to have, that this is some of some things that we can predict and see in foresight. But it seems too soon. I really think that we should have town meetings and we should meet with whoever wants to come to the town hall, wherever you meet, Holly Hall. Talk about that these things are options and they're viable, and kind of see what people say before we go forth with a decision. Because it still isn't any sort of community building and hearing people, and then come back with our jot notes of this, these are the threads that came up, this is what people said, and then reconsider the options. I agree, we can't just push it through.
I think one of the things that would be most helpful, you know, for me to see this compendium of policies that we're charged to uphold was rather daunting. But what's also daunting is for me to look at a budget and I have no association with how many people and what they're doing in any school at any given time. How many guidance counselors are where? So we've asked for this before and never gotten it. Can we have a list? And the taxpayers have asked for this. Let's have a list. What are the offices within central office? What do all of those staff do? What's, you know, how many, is it a full-time position, a part-time position? What's the charge? And go school by school, so we have the same kind of attention that we've given to the policies to what exactly is the composition of the school districts we represent.
And for some of them, the why, like thinking
Right.
of Bristol, right? We have a principal and 2 vice principals. Why was the decision made to have 2 vice principals? Maybe it was discussed at a previous board meeting, but bring it forward, like, if that's not the makeup of any of the other vice principal situations in any of the other schools, so why was that one unique?
Because of the unique position it was in. for
I figure,
child behavior.
but like just being able to understand that.
Yeah,
and
we
think-
can get a full review, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Aaron, I now see your chair notes and like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's what we're talking about right now. Thanks.
So I mean, just to throw out maybe a slightly contrary view, although I don't generally agree, I think with the sentiment of the board, is I think we've seen in 5 minutes 50 different individual things that have been brought up, right? And I think that there's some value in getting in the weeds. But we have to be somewhat careful because we're gonna get lost there quickly, especially on a revote. I really think what we need to do is try to meet the community partway for this 3rd revote with a pledge to look forward, as Debbie told us, right? To have that level of depth of understanding be a part of our every year process, making huge decisions under the gun in 3 weeks can't possibly be an effective approach.
It might be the most effective.
I can say I agree that 3 weeks doesn't seem effective. The flip side, what I've heard is the community doesn't trust the board, even though we're a relatively new board, a lot of us. And so to say that we pledge to do better in our next round, right, might not be believed.
We don't have any trust.
Right, but how can we as a
I'm not
board
saying I disagree
possibly
with you, I'm
know,
just saying that.
know enough about the intimate details of a school system that's a $40 million budget in 3 weeks of effort?
I don't know that we
I don't-
have to. I think we just need to listen a lot more to what people are concerned about. And then share it out, right? Like, and we have to be able to communicate better. I'm sorry, I did not mean to interrupt you.
No,
either, but-
you're good.
but-
So that's what I'm saying. I think that we need to get the scale right. Right? Asking for additional justification, for example, about why cuts are coming from here as opposed to this broad bucket, central office, construction. That feels like a level that we can do the community right by providing some answers for why the budget is being put forth the way that it is. It doesn't get into the weeds of exactly how many people are in each of those positions or exactly what dollars being spent on the roof versus that beam in versus, like, we can't possibly do that this year. Like, I just don't see it. So if we can find a level where we can be responsive to community input, help provide some of the justification for the budgets that we're putting forth in a way that doesn't just say, this is what we think, but also this is why other choices broadly weren't made. I think that starts to get there in a way that's feasible. And I agree, we don't have a whole bunch of trust, but like,
I'm not
What are
saying
you
I
gonna-
disagree with
what are
what
you
you're
gonna
saying,
do?
I just don't know
Like-
how the community will receive it.
We have to do something different though, because it hasn't worked so.
but that's what this is different, is we're saying we need to push for more, like, we haven't been pushing for justification. We've been giving the sort of broad overview of this is why these choices are, but without really the context for why it couldn't have been something else. At a macro level. So maybe that's not enough, and I could be in the minority in that, but I don't know. I've spent, the 15 months I've been on this board now, trying to understand school board finance, right? And let me tell you, it's a hell of a task, and I'm just maybe getting there. And so for us to get there in 3 weeks and then bring the community with us,
And I think what I'm sensing, and then Liz, I'm gonna jump here in just a second, is that what you are all doing, I did like 6 weeks ago when I was elected chair. And it's because of everything we're talking about. And I think I cried in Patrick's office when I first met with him the first agenda building day because of, it's so heavy.
It is.
It's so heavy. So then after my little breakdown and tons of gummy bears, it's just coming to me that we have to do this really effectively. And where we're all jumping to is where the community is all asking us to jump to, and it's beautiful. And we need to. But we can't, as a 13-person board, do all that jumping and also attend to our other task list.
So
At one time,
Yeah.
sorry, at one time, but we can do it incrementally really well. Mastery of any skill isn't just done in a day or done in 3 board meetings. It's done with dedicated practice to that skill. And we have not, as a board, and I'm speaking from my 2 years of experience, done that work.
And
So here we are.
And I appreciate you saying like, this is gonna be on every single
It's on every
agenda moving
agenda,
forward.
yeah.
It needs to be. I just think we need to make sure the public, that needs to be part of our messaging.
Well, that's what I'm working towards. That's what,
People don't listen, right? They
No.
don't read the minutes, they don't watch the
I know.
recording, so like,
know.
how do we get that information?
we do it by demonstrating that what we say we're gonna do, we're doing, and we communicate about that. Over and over and over and over. Liz,
Yeah, that was very settling, Erin. And I mean, I'll take a lot of accountability for that you know, I have been a part of the process that has been really frustrating for our community. So I'm happy to learn ways to do things different and better. I think community forums, I think community engagement, we look at our charge and we work on the back and forth. But to the budget. I want to start by saying that I support what's been put forward and I understand we don't want to push. I also understand that we all, including administration, has heard our community, and I do believe this is reflected in what I'm wondering in which ways there's not riffs that was heard. There's another coaching staff because there was already one in the previous one. I also want to take some time to acknowledge what is reflected in this that we have heard. So that's another way to show our community that we're hearing them by saying, what have we heard? And we've all heard a lot. What do we see in this that reflects that? And there's already been questions about what we see that we're concerned about it not reflecting. In what way would that serve our community if we were at an 87% budget and we weren't able to pass anything? How would that serve them? What concerns have we heard that letting this go down to that level and not trying a 7.6 or something similar? How would that be addressing our community concerns and the needs of our students and staff? So, and I don't think I've heard any questions tonight that can't be answered at all. But I haven't heard anything that perhaps maybe hasn't been touched on in the past. And I look forward to touching on again because I think it's a great point that we're not, even the DMG report, perhaps policy governance, right, doesn't have the evidence. There's a DMG report done for Vermont that has a lot of evidence and is primarily focused on meeting student needs. And that's through the MTSS system, right? So there is a ton of really valid research out there. For some of the choices that are being made, we can focus on that. We can learn about that. We can learn what's in each school and how it's all looking and working. We can do surveys. We can get like a new fresh start. And the only problem with the DMG report is it was done before COVID. Perhaps that, is something to be considered in that, maybe that needs to be redone in terms of number, or student waiting was just done. I don't know, maybe it's not completely accurate. So we want to shift some of our funding and how we address problems to not necessarily be by the book. We also have problems with multiple schools, right? So if all our students were together, the ratio that's suggested in the DMG report would work really well if the students all had access to it. So there's a certain number of nurses per student. Well, our students are all spread out. So they don't get the access that the numbers imply they should have per student, right? So, or our classroom averages. They all fall within the average range. However, because there's a smaller one in one school and a larger one in another school, and they're not together in the same hallway, we can't split the kiddos so that the actual experience in the classroom by the staff and the students is falling within that range because we're averaging across different schools. So you have to have a smaller one balance out with a larger one. These are real things that I was referring to earlier about hearing what's really important to our community and then setting up the circumstances for those priorities to be met. So I think that does take a long time, and we are going to have some awesome, I'm going to learn a lot. I'm going to just, if every question that's been asked tonight was answered, I've learned a lot. So I'm not saying that what's been put forward tonight is right exactly what everybody is hoping for, but I would like to recognize that there is a lot of what we've heard that is reflected in that.
Thank you, Liz. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, if I may, so my prior question was really specific, but I looked at the numbers, and it was like a very small margin that our budget went down, but what really struck me was that there weren't a lot of people that came out to vote.
Yeah.
And my thoughts are, what are those people who did not show up to vote thinking? It's not the people who voted that concern me right now, because I think they're gonna make the difference in this next vote. And how do we get that information? And I think we really need to get to that level before we even start moving forward. And I think we need to move forward quickly, but how do we do that?
Can we charge our students for that? They're protesting already, right? Like,
Exactly.
get people.
They're
get
they're gonna
people
be
to
out
voting.
on Thursday as well.
Like that,
Yeah.
they're being heard and seen, right?
And what was your plan that I derailed slightly about the order of operations? We're talking about what we should do.
Well, we're sort of jumping all over the place at the moment. We're talking about, we talked about what Patrick had considered as new information coming in that was just meant to be new information coming in for us to use. Then we were gonna discuss if we'd like to attempt to use this new information. It sounds like y'all want to dig a little deeper. And then I was gonna talk about community education. So who are the key players we really need to get to in order to make this vote work? And we've generated some ideas already, such as digging in justification wise for general budget questions where there's areas of large money, construction line services, for example, concern over the positions and breakdowns of different things, especially the delineation of central office, and perhaps the difference between what is central office and what is coaches versus coordinators, so on and so forth. Then we talked about RIFs a little bit, right? Where they might be and why. Talked about new attrition, how we use that, and is that justifiable? And then now we're sort of into the community engagement idea. So we're sort of following it, just, in our own way. But I'm happy to, if people need to live in this sort of what other justifications do we need area? Sort of sounds like we got, we had a heat of passion moment where we sort of threw a lot out, but if people have other ones as we're sitting and talking, let's talk about that. Yeah. Okay. So other ideas that for justification or board information, what kind of information would be helpful from Patrick and his team around the community topics that we've heard or other things that need to be considered as we're moving through this budget process and leaking into 26, right? Fiscal year 26, which will be what we're really hoping to focus on very soon.
I have one. I'm hearing a lot about spheres where, a kiddo is in a state where you need a classroom to move out. As a former elementary school teacher, been there not very often. And so and I'm also hearing about it from other folks, but I'm wondering if we can have a little bit more clarity around what are the intervention services that you're able to provide and like, how are those like, basically some clarity or reassurance around like, we know that there are kiddos who've gone through a lot of trauma. We know that that's part of our responsibility as an educational system. Can you help the community understand what that process looks like and how the district is approaching it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Just as part of the budget discussion, how does that, what
Yes.
need are you meeting?
Because people are concerned about this ongoing like behavior issues and feeling like, are we addressing it in the budget? Is something happening in the budget? Are we taking away that money? Or so the budget becomes a vehicle to be able to say, this is something that we're already putting in, this is how we're approaching it.
So that sort of goes into this other one of position breakdown. So even more
Yes.
specifically, which ones address student mental health and
But I think-
behavioral need.
Yeah, but there also needs to be some clarity do you remember the woman who was sitting in the front row during one of our meetings? She was a judge. She helped me with my name change. I was so excited to see her, but she had these questions about like.
Pam Marsh.
Yeah. So Pam Marsh, I was like, Pam Marsh had some questions about like, what does it actually mean? Like, what does it actually look like? Like, these are folks who are like, we're hearing things, we're reading things, the Addison Independent. I'm wondering if maybe there's a need to just understand, like, we have kiddos in crisis. What does it look like when our district responds?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
maybe,
that was,
maybe just like what exactly is a clear the halls? What happens
Sure.
Just the basic.
So I think not to step on your idea, but I want to decouple that a little bit and do,
Oh, I like that word.
how are we meeting student need? How does that pertain to the budget? Making sure that our budget is meeting the needs that community is saying, then also dig into MTSS, which is that sort of system of support we're talking about, which we just did something on like end of last year, right? But I mean, we've had a ton of turnover too. So doing another sort of course board training about MTSS.
I teach MTSS. I'm
That's
good with it, but
wonderful.
I'm talking about for the community.
I agree, but having that be sort of a way that we're addressing that need in a really open way and then getting that information out. I'm not sure we'll satisfy it in a way that's, you know what I'm saying? We can't, if we're not all on the same page about how educated we are about that, then passing that information to other people is really tricky. And so the bits and pieces that we have might not all be accurate for how we're enacting it here. That makes sense. So I'm not,
If we're all gonna go to a different school
I don't
and have
think that's
and
what
have a
I'm-
town
That's not what I'm
discussion,
asking though.
we
Like,
all need to be sure we understand what it is we're talking about.
I get that, but I'm talking about more centralized communication that's going out to the district and the folks who are in the district. I'm not, like, I wouldn't ask each one of us to go out and talk about these pieces. Like, I don't actually know what's going on in the schools. It would be more like, do you have somebody who can like summarize what's happening and be able to share that out as part of our like frequently asked questions?
yes, yeah, we can do that, but just, you know, sort of breaking those two apart even still would that satisfy what you're asking?
I think so.
Question, yeah, okay.
Can you read that guiding question again, please? For what you're asking.
What do we need for justification from the board for fiscal year 25? This is where we're generating ideas about what kinds of information would be helpful from Patrick and his admin team for community topics or other topics we've had.
I think one that came up quite recently was the coaching model and whether or not that's effective for teachers. Or feels like it's being effectively implemented inside of schools.
Yep, I have that one.
And you kind of have this too, with the construction services line, like better understanding what's in the 4.4 million.
Yep.
Whatever the number is now, I don't know the most recent one, but what's in there.
Sort of those larger pots of money, which I have already had conversations with Floyd about, so that I think that work is started.
Yeah, like it'd be like
Yeah,
anything over $1 million, probably.
Also a delineation of improvements versus maintenance, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a good point
Yeah.
because that came up, you know, thinking about, I think helping people understand the process in addition to spelling it all out for when there's a repair versus an update that has to happen. There's certainly process behind it. And I don't think it's specific to the type of business. I think it's pretty straightforward.
So you're saying like a general, you know, what we would use construction services for versus,
Yeah,
okay,
just like a general overview to help funnel then those specific.
What's the rubric that gets
So
the
that's-
money in that?
Thank you,
Yeah.
thank you.
okay.
Yes,
So following the chain.
exactly.
Okay.
Well, I think we heard from the teachers themselves that they would love to be a part of this process. And if there's a smarter way of delivering services in a classroom and certainly even a less expensive way, or if it needs to be a little bit more, we need to realize that we need to understand how that works from their point of view as well. I mean, you've got at least 4 teachers on the board here, so we all know what it's like being in the classroom, but it's good to have their ideas of what the current climate is.
And also being careful of that line we were talking
Yes.
about means and ends, right?
Yep.
So
Right.
if that's why we're asking questions for understanding, to understand. That's why I have the coaches and coordinators model, you know, sort of digging into what's the justification beyond it being a best practice,
Yeah.
right? So how do we see that in action?
Well, and I think that gets to kind of like, I appreciate all the data, I'm very data driven, like when you're talking about these cuts and how it still gives us the right ratios, that's great, but it's not gonna, it may not be meeting the
Need the
needs.
need.
Right, because of, you know, like Liz articulated really well, we have 13 here and 25 here, the needs. Our ratio of teachers or whatever in there is fine, but it's a different experience and the needs may not be being met.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge, but I also think it has to be communicated to the community, like, we do hear you. We want to make sure that we're meeting all of our kids' needs to the best of our ability, but it's gonna cost us more because we're gonna have to have more than what the ratios tell us we're going to have to. I personally would be fine with spending more money on that. I think our community would be as well, and articulating that well so that it's clear that we're investing in that piece and maybe not something that's an improvement versus a need from a maintenance perspective.
Yeah.
It connects to the ends conversation as well. What does it look like when we are meeting the needs? How do we define that?
Well, and
That's a good point.
yeah, I went through a lot of the material before we came and read a lot of the reports, and I think, Patrick, it was the ends monitoring report from October that you put together, and I had a million questions and I won't go into it, but like, one of the things I say, it's like, you're benchmarking you or the state, where you benchmark against the state. Do we benchmark against regional? What if the state's failing? Then we're benchmarking against failing numbers. The conversation for a different time, we can table that. I don't want to derail.
Oh,
the
it's
budget
in here as a
conversation.
thing we're gonna dig in.
Okay, but that like came up for me, like, that's great, and I understand that metric and that data, but is that the right set of data? Should we be looking broader? Was a question I had.
Okay, yeah.
I think the other thing that we need to kind of keep churning around is, how do we pull, some student representation in to make sure that all of our conversations are being communicated out effectively. I know that there's been a lot of chatter on social media. There's been a lot of confusion, not necessarily accurate information that's been out there, and I get it. But I think that we need to keep in mind that our students are going to be very effective communicators, and they're all on the social medias. So I think we need to keep that in mind. And I don't know, I know that Isabella's graduating, so I don't know if maybe Erin would have a recommendation of somebody else that we could pull in for, maybe even a sophomore. So that they're gonna have enough time to come to some of these meetings. And maybe if we, feed them pizza every now and again, they'll be okay with staying on for next year as well. Just to be sort of an educated voice on behalf of the students. I think that's really important. Good point.
Okay.
The community council, just because that's really specific. They did already appoint another person, and I believe it's a freshman.
Oh,
to
wow.
join us. But they'd be a sophomore next year.
So if we hold basically a mini town meeting in each of the towns that we represent, we should be able to have enough data to be able to answer questions and to bring back more of the feedback.
Yeah.
But do we want to go with a proposed budget?
So that's sort of
is the
what
cart
this-
before the horse to do it that way, or?
This is sort of
So
what
the-
we're talking about, right? Do we want to do that, or is it more important that we have that community input? Again.
Can I just interject some numbers?
No. Can we just make a motion? Somebody, that's all you need to do, make a motion. Right? No, I'm really angry. This is not fair.
Yes, like you, yes.
Thank you. There's some conversation about the going ahead with 87%. I think it's really important to recognize what 87% means. It's not 87% of what we rolled forward of our current budget. It's really less than 80% of our current budget that we would be trying to spend or limited to spend. I think it's very important and that the board understand a 20% drop from our current, a 13% from our current year drop puts us at 29 million. Our original budget with everything that we had in place rolled forward was 37 million. That's $7 million that isn't in the budget if we run 87%. That is you want to talk about a number that's going to be impactful to kids. Take $7.9 million out of our budget.
So my understanding is that that's an imposed amount. However, you can vote after July 1st and change that amount, correct?
But we're going to go into the year working under that.
That's
budget
correct.
constraint.
That's correct.
So
But
what
it
did
can
we
be
cut?
changed July
What did we
5th.
cut to
It
make
can be
it happen?
changed July 5th.
It absolutely could.
Yeah.
I just think it's important that the board recognize what they're talking about is almost $8 million from what rolling forward, the current level of service is to 87%. I'm not, no opinion on it, but recognize that it's a large number that we're rolling the dice that we can make it work on the back end.
And Floyd, I heard on the radio that we have to pay interest on that 87% that we borrow because we don't actually have it. Is that correct? That like that.
That's correct.
Okay.
So in addition.
You pay interest on what you borrow. You don't have to borrow the full 87%, but you can borrow up to. And you would pay interest on whatever amount you do borrow.
And I'm sitting in a meeting tomorrow morning around a piece that they put in that will allow us to access ed spending funds to a much lesser degree to help to avoid all those interest charges.
Yeah.
So we'll see what that looks like in the next couple of days.
So balancing these two things, a suggestion that I have is, can we, if we have to be able to show that we're listening and that we're actually hearing people. So going in, we've already gone in with our 2 budgets. And I know, Floyd, you've made like 500 budgets. So, you know,
Only one so far.
okay. So can we go in with a sense of like, here's what we're thinking about, or like, here's what you're thinking about. Here are the areas that we see that are on here. We know that there is a problem. We understand that the community is upset. Can we hear from you about what you think about this and what you want to see be different and how we can work together? Like that is, I'm thinking of not, this is a fixed budget, but this is the material that we're working with.
This is the information we
Yeah.
have.
And I'm wondering, Melissa, what your thoughts are as a financy person? And financy, I know isn't the right word, but
I think that approach could work, definitely. I'm almost, I don't know, for some reason, I'm leaning more towards, I'd like to better understand. Like, I guess I feel like there's 2 camps right there. So we just can't afford 10%, right? Like dollars and cents from your checkbook. And some of that probably also is commingled with the needs of our students. But what I'm hearing louder, and it's, I don't know, is the budget doesn't feel fair, it doesn't feel like it's meeting the needs, et cetera, et cetera. What I'm concerned is that just because that's the population I'm hearing more of, and this population's bigger, like maybe our community is fine with 10%, but how we spend it is what we really need to shift. And I don't feel like we can do that and manipulate dollars and cents until we understand that from our community.
Great, I was thinking, and which goes along with what Ashley was saying too.
I think we need to hold community forums maybe next week. We sit, we chat, we take back information, and maybe we postpone our committee meetings on the 14th. And instead have another business meeting where we bring back the information, or we compile it somewhere so everybody can look at it and then come back to the table.
And concurrently, while those things are happening, Patrick is answering all of the list of questions that we were put together tonight that help us be better informed, not necessarily at that moment for when we're getting that feedback, but then when we come back to the table to say, this is what we're hearing, now we have this information from the administration, how do we move forward with it? I don't know, I'm just concerned about the timeline too.
And some clarity I'll look for from the board is I heard a lot of individual people say something they want to know more about. I have no idea what the board wants to know. Thinking about that concept of board holism, the board has not directed me or asked me as a board to bring anything back. And rather than just sort of create a laundry list of individual board members' interests, I'd like to know, because there's a dissertation level of information available just on the list that's generated so far. So I'd want to know more clearly from the board as a whole, what are you looking for from me to bring to you and when?
Is there like a legality around us creating some sort of Google form or where we could all kind of like prioritize some of these things? I can't.
well, I mean,
Why not?
Put you on the spot. You've been.
Isn't
taking
it like
notes on our
open,
questions.
it would have to be like open?
List,
the
I can
meeting
just
list.
list them out. and
Why don't
you'll-
you just
yeah, we
ask
can-
And
the
I think you
question?
did that in a way in your,
You're not- but not
ironically,
voting
you
on it.
did that in your chair notes, and then every single one of us created your list again.
Mhm.
Like that
Mhm.
says something. It's because we've been hearing it from our community. So it seems like it's coming from individual board members, but I think we just get them
Kind
all.
of reiterated everything.
Your board minutes, your
Your
notes.
chair note, can we get this?
Yeah,
So,
he has them. They're in the agenda.
I have a question, and it's regarding something that you sent out saying, about the budget, or do we want to change the budget that we had last time? So I think that is a really big question. Do we keep the budget the same and shift the spending around?
Yeah, I don't think we should set a budget target yet until we know why, get a better feeling on why it was voted down,
Right.
because I don't necessarily think it was the amount.
I don't think it was either.
Yeah.
Steve?
I mean, I might be wrong.
Right, which our community will tell us when we
Yeah.
talk to them.
I was just gonna ask if you were actually updating this live while they were talking, because it seemed like you had everything covered that was.
So I do send out my chair notes and I duplicate those chair notes into a note section for just me, and that I take notes on that,
No,
so.
but I'm looking at the one you sent out.
Yeah.
It's linked to the agenda.
Yeah.
And it looks to me like you covered
I know.
Yeah.
what, what's
That's
been asked.
information.
Or like, that's what I've been gleaning from the last, I don't know how many
Right.
meetings we've done, and just compiling that over time.
Yeah. I mean, if we needed to make a board motion, I'd say that we'd need more general information based upon the chair notes,
A through E.
A through E.
I think it's really important for us to have a really good understanding of what's in our individual schools, what's in the individual schools that we're talking about. I mean, do you know how many people are in how many teachers are in your school? Do you know how many support staff are coming up to support staff negotiations? Do we know how many people are in each school? I don't, and I'm there pretty regularly.
Not frequently, the art teacher is there,
Yeah.
the nurse, the school counselor.
We have no idea. That would be something I'd like for the board to all have a better understanding of, especially before I go to any kind of a community meeting. I want to be able to understand what's in that school. Because we're an aging population, and how many of the people that actually voted have been in schools recently?
So I think the only thing I would add about that is it's not just about Beaman.
No, it's
When
about
you go,
every school.
right,
yeah.
so you'd need sort of a rundown of every school
Right.
that we serve, because when you're talking to New Haven voters, they're talking about Bristol, Starkborough, right, and Moncton, so on top of New Haven, so we have to sort of not only broaden our reach about who we're talking to and why, but how our voters are thinking about it too. It's beyond just the Beaman building or the Mount A building, right? It's everywhere, so I understand your ask. I don't know how quick that kind of information might be just pulled and sort of bulletized. But if
Yeah,
that,
you had a staffing spreadsheet that went
Yeah,
out
the-
last year. I thought that-
Yeah, the FTEs of various positions in different
Right.
schools
Yeah.
that's readily
It's right there.
available.
so we can just pull that as,
I think the population of how many students too are in each school along with that.
Since I know nothing, about MAUSD for the most part, I mean, I just got to like have a tour of BES yesterday, for my kindergartner. I'd be happy to go out and do I just need to keep, to go here, I can't explain, I can't tell people about what's going on, but I can definitely listen and take back and be space. When I say be space, we've been doing, and when I say be space, I mean, when people are pissed off, it's okay to be pissed off at me, I can do that. So we wanted to have a first round. And I'm also since I'm going off and since it's 9 p.m., I don't teach classes next week, but I still have babysitters. So you tell me where you need me to go and I will go, and I'm happy to go. I'm happy to talk to anybody. I'm happy to hear people be upset. I'm happy to take notes and bring it back. I can do that. I don't want to have to wait for, it sounds like we're giving you a lot of homework to do during a busy time of year. So I don't necessarily want to feel like we're making people wait, since we also have the short time. So I'm okay, put me in, where do you want me to go? I mean, I haven't even been to some of the towns yet outside of Bristol. I
So-
sound terrible, I'm sorry, but
so just so you all know, before this meeting, I have set up with Jennifer and with Patrick links for community-based meetings for each town. For Zoom links. It comes down to us getting together to say, here's the day we're holding those meetings, here's how we're inviting people to those meetings, but some of that legwork is already started. So
Let's do it.
let's do it.
Yes.
I guess.
Can we have it in person and on Zoom?
Yes.
Great.
It takes a little bit more finagling with technology. So we'd have to sort of work through how we do that. They might not be able to be held all at the same time. We might have to do maybe 2 towns in one night and other towns in other nights.
I can also meet during the day because I teach at night. Well, I don't teach next week because we're almost done. But if we have, because I remember that we have people who can't always come at
Yeah.
night. Like, and we could possibly do the weekend too. I mean, I definitely can't do the weekend without having a 4-year-old with me, but
Mhm.
is that something you've considered as the like many different times?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's, and when Patrick would be, I think having Patrick or admin support during those times is also important. So making sure that Patrick and his team were available for.
Are you sure? Like, are you sure?
I'm not sure what.
Well, I mean, if people like, if I'm saying I'm willing to go out and let people share their frustration, I don't know that you need to be there for that. Like.
It's just a matter of whether or not people will feel frustrated because we don't have something we don't have a
won't.
response.
But here's what I heard quite a bit is people saying that they were afraid of retaliation. I have no idea where that's coming from or what they're afraid of retaliation. I'm like, if there's some sort of fear or stress, and I'm definitely like, I'm looking at you and I'm not trying to like blame or shame or do any of those things, but to say, maybe we do just need to have some board meetings without, like maybe you can be like, Patrick's gonna be at this one and I'm definitely not volunteering anybody else, but somebody else is gonna be at this one or the IT person's gonna be at this one. And here's somewhere you can just talk and process. Because if people are afraid of retaliation, they may not come and
And
talk.
for like transparency's sake, if they're being zoomed, then they could be recorded. Just for like if administration wasn't at the meetings, then for transparency's sake of like, this is what was talked about. Yeah, I have the same kind of feeling too of, when we did those like community-based meetings a few years ago, talking about further consolidating. There wasn't a member of the administration at those meetings,
Only board members.
only board members and the facilitator.
So how are other board members feeling about that?
I think if it's really just a fact-finding mission, then I don't see an issue with the administration not being there. I think if we're trying to have a give and take, it might be a little difficult if we're not fully informed, but I can understand the timing issue of trying to do both.
I wonder, and I think it's okay to say, I don't know. Right?
Well, absolutely, that's always okay. I have a fine taste for crow myself, so
I wonder if we pull in like a select person to be a moderator.
Who was that guy who interviewed us? The fire chief's like.
Joel
Well, it could be somebody from the select board too.
Yeah.
Having somebody from the select board's there, because that will, it's an important component
Yeah.
too. I also think maybe what we would need is a kind of like formulation of just to kind of keep all of the meetings similar, so we weren't getting misinformation, having some sort of formula of how we were gonna move through it.
Template.
Thank you.
Some structure to it.
Yeah. And the work that we've been doing, the folks in my part of UVM do community school partnerships. And so some of the things that they've been pushing out, that have been working really well is working with librarians and other folks who are not part of the governance structure, or the ones who kind of know everybody, like the librarian who was here who said that she invited us. So I'm wondering if we could also do that, is if we're thinking about select boards, if we're thinking about like, who are some of the other leaders in our community who might be able to bring people in. I know it's a very short time.
Yeah, I've already started some of that work too. I just had a conversation with Patrick about pulling in, making sure our PTOs in each town are contacted, and then, getting the union, figuring out how we bring them into. So, different stakeholders and owner groups that aren't necessarily always called on.
If you want the student voice, are we also thinking about working with ELP? Because that's the extended learning program, right, is across the whole district, or is that?
Is that up to sixth grade?
Not just,
They do middle school too.
Okay, I wasn't sure what age it went up to.
it goes to eighth grade. Okay. Oh, and then they apply for the grant to expand? Okay, good.
I'm not really sure what you mean by adding ELP in.
The extended learning program, because they have a network
No,
of,
Yeah,
but having those
Having them
voices,
promote it.
or
let
like
people- let
having
people
sessions
know.
with the kids. It's okay, I'll save that for later. It's,
oh, yeah.
I
Just
hit my
email
phone.
me that idea.
I will.
So I can, so I can follow what you're saying. Okay. So I have a good list of stuff. Sounds like the board is saying what's on the chair notes with the addition of that breakdown of staff at each house. Sorry,
I like
school.
that. No, I like that idea.
That's my work, sorry, with each school. And then we're jumping into this idea of community engagement, where we're all saying, yes, we'd like to do community engagement in our respective towns. Doesn't sound like we are needing admin support, maybe outside of having some technical assistance setting some stuff up perhaps. And then creating some sort of template to make sure that each town meeting is being run in a similar fashion, collecting similar information.
And in my dream world, maybe our frequently asked questions, we've got the little handout. Of the here's what people keep asking, why can't we move the central office into, a cardboard box?
Is the central office part of this vote?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so like a 2-pager, and for what it is worth, I have some good examples from some of the districts I worked with down in the southern part of the state, where that's what they did every year, because they kept getting questions about why are we paying $200 for the fire alarm every year? And so they just made the list so people wouldn't be grouchy anymore. They were still grouchy, everybody's grouchy.
And if you guys have ideas about what could live on that, just email them to me and I'll start compiling those.
Can I add something for our list of questions?
Uh-huh.
If everybody is in agreement. One thing that I've heard multiple times is, what's the deal with ELP? I didn't know on my money, why my taxpayer money was going to that program.
Yes.
And so I think there's a lot of questions around where ELP fits in the budget.
I was thinking that should be on there too, because it barely fits in the budget, but it's an easy one to explain. I think Floyd explained it a couple weeks ago, and then if we can have that in there.
So as one of the bigger buckets that can live in that idea.
Yeah. Maybe we want to put in something about public records, since I've learned so much about them recently.
Yep. So that's sort of tangential, but also related. So I've been doing a fair amount of thinking about that and sort of the idea that you're bringing up of an FAQ page and somehow bolstering the school board page on the MUSD website to house a lot more information than it does and be more organized. And that being one of those things that is housed there.
What's really great about listening to all the things that you're saying right now is, even as frustrated at different points as I felt perhaps during the training part, is realizing there's a lot of work to do and that there's a plan about how we're going to do it. I feel, even though this has been a tough night, I feel a little bit more okay, we're doing something. That feels exciting. And thank you for all your really hard work that I didn't know you were doing behind the scenes.
Sure.
A lot of hard work, yeah. Liz, I think you don't even have for a bit.
One of the questions we're gonna ask as we're talking to folks out in our community is, what is the next budget? What do you envision the next budget to look like?
Yeah, that can
I mean,
definitely.
because I don't want to go through this again every year. And, maybe they have
There's a
some
good
really,
chance we will be.
yeah. But if Virgin's passed, by the way,
Oh,
Virgin's
thank
passed
goodness.
1436 to 932.
Wow.
so that's good.
Yeah, not even close.
Pretty good
That's
turnout.
great.
It's a huge turnout.
So then, so far 2 budgets have passed out of all the revotes.
You know, so
Liz?
I would like to focus also on, we're talking about a uniformity of a template. One thing that's really important is we can't aggregate data either, and we can't truly, I don't think we can truly represent the voices that we hear unless we have similar questions that we're really focused on getting answers to. So, and I would like that. In fact, the easiest way is to put together some kind of survey, and that survey with the same 3 questions could go 3. I mean, I really think short because it's a ton of work, especially if you have 500 pieces of paper that you need to now go through and write down all the, I mean, that's how you be true to every voice that you hear. There might be only 1 or 2 that say something particular, but those matter, right? So the same 3 questions, but a Google survey could, for instance, be sent out to students. Something really really appropriate, right? Also matters. And being really thoughtful about these questions, like a thought exchange that we had done had 1 question and generated a ton of really valuable information. Looking at the information that I could bring to our next meeting these questions that we've asked in the past. I'm not hearing a lot of different things now than I heard 5 years ago. It's very similar from my perspective. So I will commit to bring that, to share that. And so that Google survey could go out to students that Google survey could go out in Front Porch Forum. That Google survey could have a link that people could click on when they're at the meeting, right? Or when they come to this gathering, like when you're leaving. A lot of people have gone to restaurants and have to use that little bar. A way that to also aggregate this data in a timely way, because we did take months putting together all of the answers to these questions that we've heard in the past. And there are people who, I mean, I can see being intimidated going to a meeting where there's a community of people and you feel like you might be the only one that feels a certain way. So I know it's not necessarily super accessible for everyone in our community to do online surveys, but somehow to really truly have an anonymous way or an exit survey when people are walking out the door that they can just write on. And you don't necessarily have to count on them stepping up, stepping forward, and using a big voice, right, to get heard. But just 3 questions. And I think that we will be drowning in data, like really, really quickly. But we can do it. We can definitely do it. So I feel like that somehow, Krista had a really great 3 questions right before community engagement. I don't know if Chris remembers. She had a really just 1, 2, 3. So somehow, Aaron, something we could pull those out and just, I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't articulate very well, but I hope that that's kind of making sense in a way that people can, or even we've done a 1 through 10 and you have 10 different priorities listed. And then everybody, when they were going to go vote that year, it was sitting right next to it, right at the ballot boxes. I hope a lot of people remember seeing that when you went to vote, right? And so it was a whole list of priorities, and then you circled on it what was most important to you. Like this priority is a 2, this is a 10, right? So that, and like ways to make it possible for us, and then some of the thicker, deeper engagement over time.
We have a lot of ideas about how to build what questions we're gonna ask. And it's 9, and we still have executives and another public comment section. So,
Sorry.
what I suggest is if you have ideas, like maybe what Liz shared, if you have independent ideas, if you could please email me and I will start compiling those things. It sounds like we're gonna need to create another board meeting perhaps for next week to get this sort of nailed down so that we can then set a meeting date for community engagement and and then do some really big thinking about how we're gonna get a budget target even set, and then how we're gonna get the warning and stuff out in appropriate time. Because I mean, if we don't want to run up against running with the 87% or whatever, we need to do some thinking about what we need, how we're gonna use our time really effectively. Having said that, the next two things on our agenda were setting a budget target, which doesn't sound like we're gonna do. And then setting a vote or setting a date for the next vote, which it also sounds like we're not gonna accomplish today.
Aaron,
Yeah.
do we have unlimited, not unlimited time, but, we don't have to set, like, we could do it on the 21st or the 28th or the 4th, like, we have, room to play with setting a vote. Because through all the discussion, I was like, what is our?
Yeah, so I think if tonight we had said, yes, we're comfortable, we set a thing, you know, we were thinking sometime towards the end of May would be what we were targeting for a vote. But because we're not doing that, we do have some play. It just has all the towns had agreed that the 21st was gonna work for them. But sounds like right now that's okay. Thanks so much for agreeing, but we're gonna pick another time because we have more work to do before we're ready for that.
And I think another Tuesday that has been, I don't remember exactly why, but Tuesdays seem to be the day for votes. So that if not the 21st, it's just a matter of thinking about what would the next Tuesday be. The 28th is the Tuesday following Memorial Day. So what impact does that have on a budget? So there are some things that will be worth considering.
But yes.
So July's not that far off when you start
Correct.
thinking
Right.
about.
When you start looking at Tuesdays.
Next, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah,
What's the last day of school in this district?
the 18th.
So it's not feasible to hold the community events next week.
No.
I think if we don't have something nailed down that we've all agreed is what we want to ask and know, then no, it's not feasible.
And I'm still, so I think the conversation just now is about asking questions of the community, and what we're trying to find out. I'm not sure I have clarity on
What we're asking.
what you're
of you.
asking of me and when you want me to give that to you.
So it sounds like I will send you a list of the things that's heavily generated from what was on the chair notes. And then with the addition of that breakdown of staffing. And ELP added to that bucket we'd like to explore.
It would just be helpful for me if there was a motion to do that, and then it's clear in the minutes, and I have my clear directive, and that makes it crystal clear.
Can you also, ELP in the early childhood world means something totally different than ELP in the elementary school. So if we can maybe make that distinction, because I talked to home providers and they were part of Act 166 and they all thought that the ELP meant they were going to get more money or their families were going to get more money.
Yes,
So differentiating between those two programs is important.
or just writing it out. so
Right.
that- Okay,
Completely spelling it out.
okay. Okay. So how do we create that motion?
Well, it's a big list.
Yeah.
If you're gonna get it to Vicky to put in the minutes, you might have to send it to her separately.
Right, okay.
Send it to Jennifer.
I will send it to Jennifer. Okay. So can we make it more simple and say,
I make a motion that we authorize Aaron to send a list of questions gathered from the meeting to the administration for board information.
I second the motion.
Hang on, oh, I'm sorry, the clarification on the, I'm sorry, the board authorizes the chair to send a list of questions.
Budgetary questions.
Would you include a due date in that?
Budgetary questions.
And enrollment questions also.
but let's,
Wait a minute.
yeah, let's just make it kind of simple, so it's not trying to
We're not-
capture everything, so
It's
just,
just the list of questions.
Yeah.
So we don't have to regurgitate the list of questions now. That list of questions to the administration and for a response for board information by
we want to say May 14th, which would be when we were gonna have committee meetings, but 2 weeks, it'd be 2 weeks.
Just breathing for a minute.
I was.
So we
That
intend to
will-
cover,
Something too.
That will be all we do for 2 weeks. Is prepare that
Yeah.
information.
And
so
then
we intend,
that the list of questions be included in the.
do we intend, before we vote on this, what are our intentions, right? Uh, Do we, so top level on all of that? Or are we sending out a survey to like, so everyone can prioritize which one of those must come first? Like, and we have because I don't know, like, that's a lot and they're really great questions. So, but we're just gonna top level, right? Like a small little bit. And then if we need more on that, we ask for more and then we do more at another point in time. So I feel like we're gonna want to be talking about our community feedback. Feel like we're gonna want to be doing a lot of things. In answering some of these questions, maybe we could just prioritize them instead of all of those questions get answered by the 14th.
But
Some
we
of
still need the FA if we're, sorry, if we're considering an FAQ, right? We would still need those questions answered.
Well, some of them, right? Some of them, the board might be able to generate answers for an FAQ. Others might just be a simple, am I right about this, Patrick, situation, and being able to put that in. But the idea that Liz has about generating sort of priority lists, like which ones have to be really dug into and which ones do we understand mildly and could explain or have enough information to do something with, is sort of what Liz is getting to. What do people feel about that situation? Because it is a big ask for.
Central office, construction funding, special education, those are the ones I hear the most. Coaches.
Well, what I would do is I create a Google form of some kind, send it to you, say prioritize these, please, and then you do that. Great. Is that what people?
Yeah, and I think putting the onus on us with a very, very, like, get it back ASAP.
No.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yesterday.
all right.
There isn't a way we can do that right now. Our list is in front of us.
Not live. I think she added to it on
Mhm,
her.
we
personal
did.
notes. And Brad's not here.
And Brad's not.
Brad's not.
I also, Patrick, I heard you say it's gonna take your next 2 weeks, and I'm like, is there a way that we can get this information in the like streamlined form that's not going to take the next 2 weeks? Like, or is there something that you need us to find that we can share on the FAQs? Because I don't actually want to take your next 2 weeks when you have other things going on. But I know we do need this information. What's the simplest way to communicate it? Obviously not like a PowerPoint presentation or an essay. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, any one of those topics have many layers. If we're staying really high level, then that can be done much more quickly. And I don't know how much further ahead we'll be than the current level of frustration, because there's so much context, and if you don't take time to consider the context, then we're missing sort of the point of what we're trying to do.
Right, I think it's Kathy's point of cart horse, or, yeah.
Yeah, so grain size is not necessarily clear to me. And that drives a lot of how much time will need to be invested to deliver what you're asking for.
But if I send out a Google poll and say like, which ones have to have the deepest level of understanding, or what do we have to have the deepest dive into? And we could have 1, 2, or 3 of those even, then the rest of them, yes, answer these questions, but maybe at a more 30,000-foot view. Then we continue to do that work, digging into those buckets as we go through. We're not dropping them off. We're just, which ones do we need?
Yep.
So I'll dedicate to having that Google poll out tomorrow. And if y'all can answer it by Friday, then that at least gives Patrick a heads up about what's important for us.
And is it possible to get that data by the 10th if we're gonna meet on the 14th?
We'll have to talk about
Good
what that
question.
looks like. Yeah.
I don't know that I can answer
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I think a
I'm
better
not
idea
sure
once
either.
there's the priority
Yeah.
list.
Yeah.
And how do I adjust my motion?
Well, it hasn't been seconded yet.
That's right. Not that we don't love you, Steve, but nobody.
Can you just
seconded
read back what you have?
The board authorizes the chair to send a list of budgetary questions to the administration for a response for board information by May 14th, 2024, and that the list of questions be included in the minutes from tonight's meeting.
It's been a prioritized list.
That's, yeah, a prioritized list.
And that the list of prioritized questions.
Well, I mean, even at the beginning, to send a list of prioritized questions,
Oh, that's-
and then don't have to talk about it again.
To send a prioritized list of budgetary questions.
Would they, I think, and a
And what
key
was the
piece
di-
for me is the expectation that the greater depth is specific to the top 1, 2, or 3 highest priority.
Right.
Right.
Top three.
And
yeah.
whether it's 1, 2, or 3 depends on which items are 1, 2, and 3 and how much depth any one of those might have. I think it's hard to say with certainty right now how many of those 3 can get the depth that they
So-
might require.
And are we saying we want his answers before we have our community meetings?
I would. I mean, it's gonna take me a while to digest them and try and understand where the gap might be and what questions I might have with the board and how we would
I think-
answer.
No, no,
I think
no,
we sort
for
of
the,
have-
for the community meetings.
For the
you said.
community
Right.
meetings?
Which
Right.
was, I
So
think we
get
were saying we were
information.
just gonna go in and take feedback. We weren't going to necessarily try to answer questions.
So I'm thinking I can go take feedback and you who are better known and you've been serving in your community role for quite some time would want the information first.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel more like, I'm new here. What's going on? How can I help?
So I saw them as 2 separate things.
Yeah.
So I saw them as the detail, like, so that we as a board can better understand
Right.
what's baked into the current budget, so that
Right.
we can make informed decisions that we that feedback we get from the community can inform those decisions. So maybe we hear from the community, we really want to spend $4 million on construction, make that happen. Okay, then we take that back to the budget and say, Patrick, you can see 4 million in that budget, right? And so we use them together, but to make our decision, we get back around the table, but not necessarily have the answer. It doesn't mean I don't want the community to know the answers. I mean, I want them to know the answers. I just don't know if we can make it all work in timeline is my concern. And I would hate to go with like a mild understanding and articulate something wrong to the community in that forum and then send out
I
misinformation.
think they're gonna have to live in tandem.
And that might give Patrick more time.
Yeah.
Right? If we're not trying to get it before those
Yeah.
meetings.
So in the motion, Vicky, what was the date again? We were gonna start,
14.
and so when do we really want that back, Mo?
Well, I think May 14th is when we'll probably set the date for the community. Am I understanding that right?
That's the day we were gonna have the next meeting.
Business meeting.
Well, the next business meeting really isn't until the end of May,
No, no, no.
but we could have,
Special.
we could have a special meeting, which would take the place of our committee meetings on the 14th, which is when the committee meetings are set for.
Mhm.
We could also, if we wanted to, meet next week to talk about this exact thing again and plan how we're going to do those community outreaches for the 14th.
Yeah, I think the sooner that we can get engaged with the community, the better, because I don't necessarily like how it feels to have like our slow process and letting the social media, front porch forum, kid communication persist. Like it feels like I might, not that I love going to meetings, but I would rather come on Tuesday of this coming week and then try to get some meetings out as soon as possible and not wait until the 14th because.
But we won't have Patrick's information back.
Right.
So
But I think the
until
four-
the 14th.
Yeah, I think that's.
But is that-
fine.
And I think that's fine. I don't think we need them at the same, I don't think we need his information before we meet with the community.
No, but I was wondering, do we want it on the 13th? So we have a chance to look it over,
Yeah.
Before we meet them.
develop some questions about it. As we come on the 14th, we're not like
Yeah.
just getting it in our faces for the first
Right.
time.
Yeah. I'd feel comfortable with that.
Yeah.
So May
May 13th?
And is
That
that
makes
motion
sense. Sorry, I was
completed?
trying to get you more time, but that makes sense.
Well, I mean, at least one evening to kind of stare at something before we walk in the
Yeah, no,
door. It's always helpful. Even if it's just to generate a bunch of misinformed questions, at least, you know, we got a chance to look at it.
And the important thing that I'm taking away from this is whatever information is delivered on the 13th is the beginning, not the end.
Correct, absolutely.
Yeah. Is that motion?
We can ask more intelligent questions if we've seen it a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
So are you comfortable with that motion before you ask for a second?
If you could at least read it one more time.
The board authorizes the chair to send a prioritized list of budgetary questions to the administration for a response for board information by May 13th, 2024, and that the list of questions be included in the minutes from tonight's meeting.
So moved.
A second. Which one of
Who
you?
was that? You said, I'm sorry.
I'll take it, Kristen. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. So we're tabling, setting a new budget target and tabling a date for a next vote. The next thing was a short discussion about fiscal year
Hold on.
26.
Do you need motions to that effect?
Yes, thank you, sorry, let's go back. So can I get a motion to table action for setting a new budget target for fiscal year 25?
So moved.
Kathy?
Second.
Barb seconds. All those in favor of tabling that action, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions, motion passes. Can I please have a motion for the action to set a date for the new vote for fiscal year 25? Motion. Melissa? A second?
I'll second.
Barb? All those in favor of tabling that action, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions, okay. And then the next thing was a short discussion about fiscal year 25, or sorry, fiscal year 26. In the chair notes, I said we're adding that budget building to the agenda for each business meeting. I included a copy of the new yield bill, which is for your information, and it's about things that the state has just put into play, set in motion about how things are gonna unfold next year as part of the budget building cycle. I'm not sure if you guys want to dig into that now or would like to just have this as this is where we're starting from.
The link is broken because they took it off the general assembly.
Okay, I will send that back out for you all.
I noticed it.
What does
Yeah,
that exactly
because they
mean?
just keep changing it, right?
Yeah, it's
I
like.
will.
In 2 days' time, it went from version 3 to version 12 or something.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I will find the most current one and send that back out to you. Other things that have already come up that we've already been talking about are the ends policy, which is heavily baked into what we're all talking about. The Levinson report, which is something that I don't think we have a good level of understanding for cost savings or how we move forward. And also Liz mentioned the DMG report, which might be interesting as we're looking at how our schools are comprised and what services live where. And then just continuing with the idea of how we're moving forward with the different stakeholder and owner groups as we're doing that work. So it's all the same stuff we're talking about tonight and generating ideas for, and then carrying that forward. So we're not letting that drop. We're doing all that work going forward. Is there anything else people want to discuss about that now? No. Okay, we're gonna move into the second.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
You guys didn't vote on the action set language for warning. You did the first two.
Yep, you're right. Yep, I
Oh,
didn't have it on my agenda.
Oh,
Yeah,
right.
we had to add it to the agenda. Thank you. Okay, so because we're not setting a budget, we're not warning one, so we need an action to table.
Move we table.
Jackie first, Kylie second. All those in favor of tabling the action, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions, okay. Now we'll move into the second public comment section. Anyone in the room first, and then we'll move to Zoom. Yeah, come on in.
So I just wanted to make a suggestion. Kathy, I specifically heard you asking for numbers around, how many special educators are in the school, how many kids are in, the school in each grade. And so I think when we're looking at like student services, that's individual. And so it doesn't go by like the whole class size. So it might be in your best, or I would really urge it to be in your best interest to try and narrow it down more. So if we're looking at how many nurses we have in each school. Also look at how many medically complex children we have. How many children do we have that need medication administered by them? If we're looking at how many special educators we have per school, also look how many children, receive 504s, IEPs, have disabilities on file. I think that is the key part that is maybe missing from that, because otherwise it's just numbers, not what individual children are needing and, being denied. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room? Yeah, Sean.
Hi again, Shauna. Thank you, and I apologize for interrupting. As you can tell, I am very passionate about a lot of these things. It can be very frustrating. Mostly because often when we're in this position, because of policy governance, because of, yes, we don't know all the facts about how things work, but that I feel like the reason people don't show up is because they don't feel heard. So for you guys to do what you did tonight means a lot. When I was reviewing some of the records, the part that was disappointing was seeing that you guys were upset and asked questions about what happened with the lobby project. But then immediately it was switched to, how do we convince people? How do we sell this? How do we make people believe that this was necessary? Because then it's just spinning it. And that's what I felt like. I understand the need to have a vote very quickly because of the circumstances, but that's how I felt the agenda was tonight, was that it was, let's spin it. Let's just get the information from the administration to sell this to the voters, to make them vote yes, not asking us. So for you guys to do this and actually ask and insist on that is something that is what matters. And I know that I personally appreciate that. And I know other people will too, because it's not just about just the end number. It's about being heard. And that's historically not happened. You can see it in the minutes. You can hear it from the community. It has not happened. And if things are not working the way they are, then obviously things need to change. So making the changes and saying, well, things we've done in the past really haven't worked. So let's do something different. And that's what I think happened tonight. And I just wanted to let you all know, I know you guys all work hard. Patrick, Floyd, Beth, Trina, everybody, I know you guys do. And I know there's so much that goes into it, but just listening and transparency is everything. Everything matters, because that's how you help. That's how how we help give support to. But we have to see all of it. We have to see why those numbers are there. What is it that's actually needed, and have the information just available. So like when we send out like the new link, if you could just put that on the website for the new yield bill, things like that. That's the transparency that we need to have. We need to have access. And even if most people don't read it, the people that do have really loud voices, like me, because they'll keep talking about it. And what I'll talk about now is that you guys are listening. So that matters. So I wanted to thank you.
Thank you. Wendy on Zoom.
Hi, sorry, I couldn't find my unmute button. I want to echo what Shauna just said. It feels wonderful to feel like the community is finally being heard. And the questions that the board has asked at the last couple of meetings, I feel like, personally, I feel you care, you're digging, you're trying to get the answers that the public wants and we need. It's our money that we're spending on these children, and they deserve it, but we deserve to know where our money's going. We deserve to have a little bit of a say in it. I know we don't know the ins and outs of how a business is run, that part of it, that's up to Floyd and Patrick. I totally understand that, but you also have to understand that it's our money and we have a right to ask these questions and have this information. I'm thrilled personally that you're not filling that math coach position, because I think just my personal opinion, that coaches are a huge waste of money. I've said it before and I'll say it again. But I am concerned that you're still only looking at reducing student support staff. There's still no reductions in administration anywhere. Do we really need 12 administrative assistants in our district? Do we, and maybe we do, we need to look into it. Do we really need 4 assistant principals when we're being told that our numbers are lower than they've ever been before? You know, I think we need to look into these things. Is it necessary, or are we just doing it because we've always done it? And maybe it is necessary, but again, the public wants to know and they deserve to know. I'm really concerned about not filling that special educator position. We're not meeting the needs of our special needs students as it is. So how is that going to get better if we're down a position? It's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. You're just creating a much bigger problem than we already have in our district. So I'm very concerned about that. I love the idea of the community input meetings. I feel like that's what the community has been asking for. And I know it just puts more on your guys' plates, and know that the community really appreciates it. And I know it doesn't get said enough, but you guys are working hard and we do appreciate it. But we need to make sure that the information that we gather from them is actually going to be considered, that we're not just appeasing the public by holding a meeting. The information needs to be considered, and we need to know that we're heard. You're not just having a meeting to pat us on the back and make us feel better. And I don't feel like that's what the board is doing. But I can tell you from personal experience that that's what's happened with the administration in years past. So I hope that doesn't happen again. I guess that's pretty much it. Thank you to the board for asking those really, really tough questions and not giving up tonight. I really, really appreciate it. And I know a lot of the public does too. So thank you very much.
Sure, yeah. Hi, I'm Wanda Bouvier, and I just wanted to say a couple of things. I would really urge the board, as Danielle said, there's very little backup or evidence that policy governance is the way to go. I've been doing a little research myself and was never in favor of it. I think that it leaves out the democracy of the rest of the community really getting good, solid information, and you as a board making decisions about important things, such as what kind of curriculum are we looking at? We're asking kids to do proficiency testing. Do you all know even what that looks like and what it means? What are we doing about our MTSS failures, and what are we doing about our successes? I think that you really aren't getting a full value of what's going on. The other thing I would say is that you talk about a voice. Please don't forget that there are people working in the school buildings. They have a voice, and they're the ones that are very affected by this. They're delivering education every single day, boots on the ground, to all of your children. And they are concerned, and many of them are very torn about even staying in this district right now. They're looking for other jobs, so to continue to wait, I agree with Patrick on this, is not such a good idea. They're gonna look, they're gonna find them. We've already seen it happen, and it's gonna continue. That's all I have to say. Thank you for everything you've done tonight. It was great. Jeff Stein? You're on mute. Should be on the bottom left of your screen, Jeff.
All right, there we go. Sorry. Yeah, I love Wanda with all my heart, and you know, I'm not a part of. I don't live in the community. I live outside the community. I live in Heinsberg, but I teach in the community, and I felt some part of the governance policy that came about tonight really gave the board a step up in where they could have a voice. I appreciated that. I also just really are in question of when we're looking for money to help save some of my colleagues that I know that the students are very supportive of, are very diligent on wanting to protect, this. And it's my classroom that we're talking about is taking this ceiling and the HVAC transfer unit out. It's like a 1.5 million possibly. And that's just what I've just heard. So I'm just like, how many how many how many possible positions could be saved with that on top of the 575,000 that we just additionally found? So I look at what I want to do best for the community that I serve, which is the community that I teach in, not so much as the one that I live in, which I have a great respect for, which is the one that I serve. So I don't know if it's like I heard somebody say earlier, I don't know if it's something that needs to be done this year. Like maybe we pocket that and save these positions and take this year of a next budget crisis, which will come back next year, I know, and maybe revisit and dig deep in what we can do to really tackle the situation. I know we talked about we can't solve it in 3 weeks, but in a year, maybe we can get a better idea on it. So, but I appreciate everything that all of you do. I know it's not easy at all, and in any standard, but it's just my 2 cents, and I appreciate you listening.
Thank you, Jeff. Teresa? Teresa?
Hi, I'm having connectivity issues, so I hope can you hear me?
Can.
I just want to say I am incredibly thankful for attending tonight and hearing the board really ask the tough questions. I think that it is a tough situation. I think that the administration works hard. I think the teachers work hard. But I do think that tough questions need to be asked. And I'm so encouraged by listening to the questions that were asked tonight. And I actually even learned a little something on policy governance. And it seems like it can be more of a real collaboration between administration, teachers, and the community, which has never been my understanding for that before. So, and again, I'm not really opposed to not having policy governance as well. So, but I was intrigued and I was excited that it does seem that there can be collaboration, which has been lacking in this district for years. And it's, we work better as a team than we do as adversaries. And I am so encouraged by what I heard from the board and the questions that were asked. A little concerned that, the cuts that were brought up by Patrick, I'm not really feeling like those additional cuts were really what the public is asking and what our concerns are. And I think that you kind of need to go back to the drawing board on that. I do think you have to take a hard look at the administration. And I know that you're asking the right questions, so it's a start. But I'm not opposed to passing a budget. And while I don't want my taxes to go up crazy, I am, it's more to me about where the funds are being spent and how they're being spent. So again, I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. I am really encouraged, and I've attended a lot of board meetings, and I've never been this encouraged. So I thank the board for those tough questions that they've asked tonight.
Thank you. And just to be clear, the information that Patrick shared today is just information. It hasn't been, that's all it is. So the cuts that we're talking about, I just want to be clear on the vocabulary we're using are just things that have materialized between this last budget fail and now. Not
Which I understand that, Aaron. I just feel like after 2 budgets have failed and you've heard a lot from the community, like go back to the drawing board and look at where the cuts should be happening. It isn't happening. And that's a little bit frustrating, but I know we're gonna go back to the drawing board, I hope.
Yeah, that's where we're at. So, thank you, Teresa. Any other public comments at this time? Okay. So the next thing on the agenda is our May meeting preparation. Ashley, you were in charge of board highlights tonight.
How you feeling about that, buddy?
Before we get there, I'll give you a chance to open the board evaluation, the Survey Monkey one on the bottom of the agenda. We need to create pairs. If you guys read the chair notes in there, there's a thing about a peer-to-peer evaluation, which is a pair of you guys. I know it looks ugly, but it's just a way for us to get in the door, sort of chatting with each other, making sure it's a check and balance for ourselves. So either you can pair up and find a buddy, or I'll find one for you. And we'll just create pairs. Let me know what your pairs are, and then we'll, by next business meeting, I expect your Google Forms to be sent to me. So, yes.
It might be easier just to make the pairs, because we're not gonna know who paired up and who didn't pair up.
Well, I'll write them down
I
and I'll
mean,
send
and
them out.
I don't think it really matters. I think.
I
you know,
agree. I don't
randomly
think
just
it matters. So, you raised your hand about something. Did you have somebody in mind?
No, I was just saying do it so we don't have to move.
Oh,
but I
Tuesday you
guess
don't have,
we
well, you're not gonna
that
do
thing.
it now, so.
Oh, I thought we were gonna do it.
When are we?
No, you'll just find a time to meet at either Zoom or in person, have coffee with someone. So sometime in between now and next
Okay.
business meeting. So it's not right here, right?
Buddy?
Okay, Mike
Yep.
and Kathy.
Yep.
Okay, Ashley and Kristen. Daniela and Kylie. Melissa and Justin. Steve and Barb. And then I'll be paired with Brad. Oh, and Liz and Brad,
Oh, there you go.
because I get evaluated by you all in another time.
You have no peer.
I have no peers.
So we're evaluating each other?
It's not really you take it, just open the thing. Yeah, it is an evaluation, but just it's just a list of questions, like, how do you think you're meeting certain targets? Are there things we can do better? That kind of thing. If we don't like how it's set up, let's talk about that too. But this is just to get our feet wet. I have a list of everyone's phone number. The only two people I'm missing are Daniela and Melissa, but Jennifer might have collected those. So I might be able to just share out the phone list with everybody, so everybody has everybody's number, okay? But feel free to do that yourselves as well. Okay, everybody good with that part?
So I write up my thing and I send it to you.
It's a Google form. Or Google Doc, whatever you want to call it. Okay,
So as far as May meeting
yeah,
preparation,
yeah.
are we gonna set a new meeting for next Tuesday?
Yeah. Yes,
Yes.
yep, okay. So next Tuesday is the 7th. And the agenda will be focused on making sure we have a clear expectation for community outreach and perhaps what questions we're using.
Template.
A template, yep.
And
And
then-
maybe some logistics about that.
And then we're going to postpone committee meetings on the 14th.
Yes. Do a business meeting?
So business meetings are usually like have all the monitoring reports and everything else baked into it. So I'm more thinking of a special
Special
meeting.
meeting.
Yeah.
I don't know that we should call it a special meeting. That has a pretty specific
Okay.
definition.
That's true. But it's
Right,
Yeah.
it can be it can be a regular meeting. It doesn't have to, we don't have to call it a business meeting. It can be a regular meeting. Special meeting has certain restrictions that we don't need to have because we have a long enough timeline to warn it, so.
Okay.
Right.
There's no need to limit yourselves.
And then for that, we're
But it
meeting.
sounds like we want to do all the agendas. But she's not gonna put those agendas out till next week, right, for the committee meetings, so we can
Right.
change those agendas.
Yeah, they would typically go out Tuesday, so.
So they just won't go out.
Right.
Right.
Those, basically your agenda for June is ready to go.
That's right.
So we'll have to put something out on Front Porch Forum that states that too, that we're not actually meeting for our regular committee meetings this month, May month, yeah.
So the 14th, we're meeting the 14th also?
Mhm. And that agenda will be centered around,
Patrick's information.
so it's sometime in between the 7th and the 14th that we'll be meeting with community, is what people are envisioning.
It's gonna be some rapid, like, information dispersing to get people to the meeting.
Well, but yeah, I mean, but that's, we can blast that out.
Nature of the situation.
14th. I wonder if we should just, why can't there be?
I have to maybe visit it done at 10. But thankfully I live really close to this building.
Mhm.
So I think I need to step out, but I'm sorry because I feel like I'm part of the reason why we're so late. So
Yeah, we just have the executives left.
if you did Zoom on executive, I can hop on Zoom as soon as I get home. If you don't, then sorry.
I think we can make that.
We'll need to anyway, this is online, so.
Yeah, we'll need to anyway. Is anyone else in that same boat? Okay,
So Daniela, if you log on to this link when you get home, if we, depending on how we go, if everybody leaves, we'll just use this same thing and stop the recording.
Okay.
If other people stay on, we'll create a breakout room. So either way, if you log on, we'll.
Thank you.
Yeah.
UVM doesn't let us use Zoom, but.
so the Google Doc is on the agenda. The top right, there's a peer-to-peer evaluation process. That's where you'll find that paper you fill out. And don't be daunted by it, just do your best and have fun with the person you're meeting with. All right, let's jump to the board self-evaluation. Ashley, do you have that up? Okay. Mhm.
So I'm up for the next meeting to do 4.6, I think, or 4.8. I've never done that before. So is there somebody that I can call on?
Yep, send me an email, remind me about that.
Okay.
Okay, for
thanks.
you, I think that's the one we just talked about.
It is.
Yeah.
That wasn't a plan or anything, you know.
All right, go ahead, Ashley.
What was the level of engagement for all board members, high or low?
Hi.
Hi.
Was the agenda followed? Yes, no comments?
Yes,
Yes.
with amendments.
Does the chair effectively establish the agenda materials for distribution to the board?
Yes.
Very much so. Is the chair effective in fostering a professional culture regarding fair and open deliberation, full participation of all members, and ensuring the integrity of the board process?
Yes.
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 Other feedback for the chair?
You're appreciated.
Thank you.
There's a lot of stuff that you do behind the scenes and it's a lot of heavy lifting and it's very much appreciated. Yeah.
The
Thank you.
conciseness of your wonderful notes is very much appreciated.
Yeah, very much. What went well with the meeting?
High level of engagement.
Yeah.
Positive feedback from the community.
Yep.
Any suggestions moving forward?
Yeah. And so you'll just generate some board highlights out of that and then just send them to
It'll be like 5 pages. It'll be good, yeah.
good with that. All right, moving right along, we're headed into executive session under T1 VSA 5313A1B labor relations. So this is, it requires that we have the finding that premature general public knowledge would clearly place the public body at a substantial disadvantage.
And I think, Karen, what you can do, if you made a motion that premature general public knowledge would place the body at a disadvantage, and then the next motion could be to go into executive session, assuming that's a yes, for the reasons listed here, as opposed to multiple
Separate.
executive sessions.
Okay,
No, actually, the Vermont School Board says it has to be two separate motions.
Two separate, not
Board
different.
must first move into
gotta
executive,
come back
must
out.
move into executive session after passing two motions. And
Oh.
that clearly, the first motion is, I find premature general public knowledge, and then the second motion is I move to enter executive session.
Right, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I just don't know that we need three motions here,
For the different topics.
because all of the topics that we'd be going into executive session about are eligible for executive session. One of them requires a premature general public knowledge. The others don't.
Well,
Or you want to clarify which one you fall under here.
well, what the VSBA also says is you can't piggyback executive sessions. You actually have to come out of executive session and go back into executive session for the next topic.
Even if the topics are all eligible.
Even, doesn't matter.
okay, so let's just start with this one. So can I get a motion that,
We actually have to have three separate executive sessions, so,
why?
because they're three separate topics. Four, actually, because we have a new employee request, right?
Well, the employee leave requests can go in one,
I guess you could probably piggyback both of those together,
Yeah.
because they're both the same.
they're the same, yeah.
Well,
I don't know what, off the top of my head, which thing that would live under the employee leave request.
Even if it's the same, so the same statute, so there's
the same
different
statute.
topics under the same statute.
doesn't matter.
Okay, so we're gonna, that's fine. Let's just bang it out.
Right now
So
it's
number
crazy.
one. For T1 VSA 5313A1B labor relations, can I get a motion that premature general public knowledge would place the public body at substantial disadvantage?
So move.
Kathy, can I get a second?
Second.
Barb? All those in favor of that finding, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions, okay. Then we need a motion to enter executive session, inviting in Patrick and Katrina to this executive.
And Liz, that's online.
Well, she's part of
She's
this
part of
body, so we don't have to invite her in separately.
Oh, right,
Yeah,
right. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
That's okay.
Is she gonna need a separate link?
Yeah, we'll get that done. Okay, so can I
So moved.
please, thank you, Kathy.
Second.
Kylie, all those in favor of entering executive session at 9:59, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, we will enter executive session.